It starts quietly, as most cosmic stories do, a flicker on a sensor, a point of brightness that wasn't there the night before. Somewhere, on a mountaintop observatory under a thin breath of air, a telescope catches sight of something moving against the slow drift of the stars. You imagine the astronomer leaning closer to the screen, the soft hum of machine steady in the dark. A line of data scrolls. A faint pulse of light, shifting position. It is nothing more than that, yet everything begins this way. The object has no name, only coordinates and curiosity. It does not shimmer like a comet, nor trace a familiar path. Still it moves. The universe, in its quiet patience, introduces a new visitor. Later, it will be called 3I/Atlas, a string of letters and numbers that tries, in human fashion, to tame the unknown. But in this first moment, before the naming, it is simply presence, a wanderer emerging from between the stars. You close your eyes and picture it. A fragment of rock and ice, perhaps a body older than the sun, drifting through interstellar space for millions, maybe billions of years. It carries the temperature of emptiness, the silence of forgotten suns. It does not glow on its own, but borrows light, the faint reflection of distant starlight brushing its surface. You imagine how cold must feel there, a cold beyond touch or thought, where atoms barely move and time slows to the rhythm of distance. The astronomers, careful and patient, watch its path. Night after night, they measure its position, tracing its arc across the heavens. They compare its speed, its curve, its defiance of gravity's gentle tug. And slowly, through mathematics and motion, they realize something astonishing. It does not belong here. Its trajectory is not closed like a planet's orbit, nor elliptical like a comet's path. It cuts through space with the clean certainty of a visitor passing through, never to return. You feel a kind of awe in that discovery, the idea that something could come from beyond, from the space between stars, and simply pass us by. It reminds you how open the universe truly is, how easily it allows travelers to move between its vast chambers. And though it carries no message, no sign of intent, you can't help but feel as though it means something, as though its arrival is a kind of quiet announcement. You are not alone in your stillness. Astronomers gather around data, sharing notes, refining estimates. Some recall the earlier visitor, 1I/Oumuamua, the first known interstellar object to grace our skies. That one had left more questions than answers, accelerated without jets, tumbling like something made, not born. And now, another has come, 3I/Atlas, glowing faintly in the night. A pattern seems to form. The cosmos sends strangers, one by one, like letters written in light. You imagine yourself standing beneath the night sky, head tilted back, watching. The faint stars shimmer. The Milky Way drapes across the dark like a whisper. Somewhere out there, beyond Jupiter, beyond Pluto's quiet circle, the visitor glides inward. You cannot see it with your eyes, but you feel its motion, a ghostly thread pulling through the solar wind. It travels silently, yet you sense a kind of momentum in it, as though it remembers where it came from, even if no one else does. Its name, 3I/Atlas, is a kind of poetry disguised as code. 3I means it is the third interstellar object discovered. Atlas comes from the telescope that found it, the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System. Even in that, there's something human. Our instinct to name, to label, to anchor the ungraspable in language. But the object itself has no care for names. It has drifted nameless for eons, across cold expanses where language does not live. Its silence, perhaps, is its truest name. You imagine its long journey, passing dead stars, frozen clouds of hydrogen, the faint warmth of nebulae where new suns are born. Once, maybe, it circled another star, part of another system. Then, through some ancient disturbance, a collision, a gravitational slingshot, it was cast out, exiled into the void. Since then, it has wandered without purpose or destination. Until now, until us, you wonder what stories cling to its surface, what chemical traces remain from another home. Scientists will search for that in its light spectrum, parsing the colors reflected off its dust. Every hue tells a secret. A certain absorption line reveals carbon, Another shows silicate. Another hints at the icy fingerprints of methane or ammonia. You listen to the language of light as though it were a lullaby, each wavelength a note in a cosmic chord. The visitor does not speak, yet it tells everything it knows. Its presence stirs a kind of tenderness in you. Not fear, not alarm, just a soft realization of being seen by something older, colder, and freer than yourself. In the deep quiet of space, 3i/Atlas continues its path, unbothered by observation. It does not know that eyes on Earth are following its every flicker. It does not know it is teaching us how to notice again, how to find meaning in the motion of things that do not mean. For a moment, you imagine what it would feel like to be that object, alone but unlonely, traveling without time, knowing nothing of destination. You would drift among stars, carried by invisible forces, never aging, never hurrying, simply existing in the grand stillness of the cosmos. Perhaps this, too, is a kind of life, not the pulsing of cells, but the patient endurance of matter itself. The astronomers release their data, their predictions, their models of its orbit. It will pass near the inner solar system, then vanish again into the night. Months from now, its light will fade beyond detection, and it will return to its long, nameless journey. But tonight, under the dome of sky, it is here, and that is enough. The thought of it, the knowing of its passing, adds a new thread to the story of everything. You stand quietly with that thought, breathing in the cool air, the world turning gently beneath you. Somewhere above, the visitor continues, unhurried, unknowing. It does not call itself anything. Yet, by naming it, you have given it a place in your mind, a tiny orbit around your own sense of wonder. The stars seem to hum with it, a reminder that movement, even slow and silent, is a kind of communication. Something changes when you notice, when you care to watch. The universe answers not in words, but in gestures of light and shadow. And as 3i/Atlas drifts inward, closer to the warmth of the sun, something faint begins to shimmer on its frozen skin, a trace of vapor, a wisp of motion. It begins, perhaps, to wake. The mystery, you realize, has only just begun to move. You find yourself gliding quietly alongside it now, the visitor without a home, the body between the stars. It does not speak, but its silence holds stories older than language. Its surface glimmers faintly, not with life, but with history. Rock, dust, ice, all pressed together, bound by time and distance. Each grain a fragment of another world, another sky. You hover close enough to imagine the cold radiating from it, a kind of stillness, so deep it almost hums. In the vast blackness, it looks small, almost fragile, yet you sense its weight, not in mass, but in memory. Every particle has been somewhere, inside a star, inside a planet, drifting through the gentle wind of creation. You think of how starlight once touched this surface long before the earth even formed. Somewhere, some ancient explosion of matter and heat flung these elements outward, setting them on a journey that has never ended. Scientists call this kind of relic a planetesimal, a leftover piece of planetary construction. Long ago, in another solar system, it may have circled a bright young star. Gas and dust would have swirled there, colliding, coalescing, heating under gravity's tender pull. Perhaps it was once part of a growing world that never quite made it, interrupted mid-formation by the chaos of its birth environment. A nearby giant planet may have tugged it loose, or a passing star may have flung it out, and from that moment, it was set adrift, carrying with it a snapshot of that system's beginning. You picture it wandering for eons through interstellar night, its surface darkened by cosmic rays, its ices preserved in eternal cold. In its frozen layers, atoms lie arranged like pages of a long-forgotten book. Hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, the alphabet of life, resting in silence. To touch it, you imagine, would be to touch the memory of a sun that burned long ago and far away. As telescopes on Earth study the light it reflects, patterns begin to reveal themselves. Through spectroscopy, the science of reading light, astronomers can decode what this object is made of. When light touches matter, it leaves a signature, an absorption pattern like a fingerprint. By studying these patterns, scientists glimpse its composition. Silicate rock, perhaps coated with organic carbon compounds. Frozen water, maybe traces of ammonia or methane. These are not random ingredients. They are the same materials from which life once formed. You begin to feel that connection, subtle but intimate, the way cosmic chemistry binds everything. The carbon that builds your cells may have once danced in the same kind of nebula that birthed this traveler. The oxygen you breathe was once locked in ice around other wandering bodies, melting only when they fell into warmer worlds. The iron in your blood was forged in the core of a dying star, then flung outward, waiting billions of years to join a living body. You realize with quiet awe that the line between you and this visitor is not separation, but continuity. The astronomers measure its albedo, the reflectivity of its surface. It is darker than expected, absorbing most of the light that touches it. Such darkness suggests a coating of organic dust, long molecules of carbon and hydrogen, born from slow reactions in deep space. These molecules, called tholins, are formed by radiation striking simple ices over ages upon ages. They give comets, asteroids, and even the moons of Saturn their reddish-brown tint. You can almost see it now, a faint russet glow where sunlight grazes the edges, as though time itself has painted it in cosmic sepia. You drift around to its shadowed side, where sunlight cannot reach. Here the cold is absolute, near 200 degrees below freezing. Nothing moves, nothing melts. Yet even here, change is happening. Atoms rearranging slowly, cosmic rays carving subtle marks into ice. Over millions of years, even silence leaves fingerprints. You think of how matter keeps memory, without knowing it. A rock remembers the pressure that formed it, though it cannot tell the story. Ice remembers the heat it once felt, through the bubbles trapped within. The visitor, too, carries a record of every collision, every scorch, every freeze. To scientists, this makes a time capsule, a message from the early universe, sealed not in words but in atoms. If you could listen to it, truly listen, perhaps it would tell you about its star, how bright it shone, how it faded. Perhaps it would whisper the planets that circled nearby, the ones that survived, the ones that did not. And yet, even if you could hear it, you suspect it would speak not of tragedy or exile, but of persistence, of simply being, drifting onward through space, indifferent to belonging. You let that thought rest in you, the idea that to exist, even alone, is enough. The universe is not urgent. It does not rush to explain itself. It allows billions of years to pass while one fragment of matter crosses the gulf between suns. And now, for this brief instant, its path crosses ours. Down on Earth, observatories continue to trace its movement. Its brightness changes subtly, suggesting surface jets or outgassing, faint plumes of vapor released as sunlight warms hidden ice. The visitor might be a comet after all, though one colder and more ancient than any in our system. Scientists debate quietly. Is it purely natural or something more complex, a fragment of a shattered world, or the frozen echo of a system long gone? Each theory adds another layer of wonder. As you float beside it in your mind, the visitor seems both solid and unreal. Its surface glows softly, but inside you imagine a hollow, a labyrinth of ice and dust, like lungs that once breathed starlight. You wonder what would mean for such a thing to awaken, not in consciousness, but in chemistry, to release gas, to turn sunlight into motion, to seem alive without ever being so. You breathe slowly, feeling the rhythm of its orbit, the faint tug of gravity as it moves toward the sun. It does not fight the forces around it. It simply yields, allowing physics to guide it forward. You realize that motion itself is a form of remembering. Every path curved by what came before. It drifts onward unhurried, carrying its secrets intact. And you, watching it, carry a quiet recognition that the same elements within you once wandered just as far. You and this traveler are made of the same story told in different forms. One becoming flesh, the other remaining dust, both held in the gravity of time. The sunlight grows stronger now, touching its frozen skin. A faint mist begins to rise, glimmering in the light. The visitor does not resist. It begins to change. The first breath of vapor unfurls into the void, marking the start of something new. Not an end, but an unfolding. You watch, quietly, as that mist drifts outward like a veil. Something ancient stirs in it. Not life, but movement that resembles life. The silence seems to deepen around it, as though the universe itself leans in to listen. And you find yourself wondering, gently, what does it mean really for something to wake? It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly. A soft shimmer in the darkness. A speck of ice and dust, drifting through the endless hush between the stars, begins to move in a way that should not be possible. It is 3I/Atlas, a visitor from beyond the sun's kingdom, a wanderer older than our sky. For months it has been silent, a frozen relic of forgotten light. But now something stirs. You watch as the telescope feeds its distant image to Earth. The comet, once dull and motionless, begins to glow faintly, like the first breath of a waking sleeper. A faint halo surrounds it, thin and blue. Then a sudden plume of vapor jets from its surface, curling into space like an exhalation. It is as though the comet has remembered warmth, and for the first time in a million years, it sighs. Scientists call this outgassing, a word too mechanical for what it feels like. Beneath the surface, volatile ices sublimate, transforming directly from solid to vapor as sunlight touches them. Pockets of frozen carbon dioxide, methane, or ammonia burst open, venting into the cosmic dark. The comet's spin shifts ever so slightly from a recoil. It begins to wobble, as if testing its ancient bones. But to you, it looks alive. You can almost send the rhythm in the pulses of vapor, a heartbeat too slow for human time. Perhaps it has always been awake in its own way, dreaming through the ages, carrying memories from the time before our sun was born. The scientists compare images taken days apart. The surface has changed. Fractures widened. Strange bright spots appear where none were before. Some call it normal. Others say something unusual is unfolding. Its energy output rises beyond prediction. Its jets fire in unpredictable directions. It rotates, tumbles, then steadies again, as though fighting an unseen current. You find yourself wondering, if this were a creature, would it be trying to orient itself? To remember where it came from? In the language of science, comets are time capsules. They hold within them the chemistry of beginnings. Frozen water, organic molecules, dust older than planets. They are what remains of the swirling cloud that once condensed into the solar system. When a comet awakens, it becomes an experiment in ancient light, sunlight meeting primordial matter, revealing how life's ingredients may have once arrived here. And yet, 3I/Atlas is no ordinary comet. It is interstellar. It comes not from the Oort cloud or the Kuiper belt, but from somewhere far beyond. It was not born of our sun's nebula. It carries the signature of another star, another cradle of creation. Its journey through interstellar space may have lasted billions of years, drifting silently among the galactic tides. You imagine that loneliness. To drift for eons frozen and unseen between suns. To carry within you a story that no one can read. Then, suddenly, to feel warmed again. To feel gravity's gentle invitation. To awaken. Perhaps that is why its awakening feels strange, not like the others. Its jets seem misplaced, as if erupting from hidden fractures deep within. Its orbit twists slightly, resisting calculation. The light it reflects flickers, almost rhythmically. No one knows whether it is breaking apart or simply changing shape in ways that defy expectation. You remember reading that comets sometimes disintegrate under solar heat, that their nuclei can fracture into smaller pieces. But there is another possibility, a quieter one, that this is part of a cycle we do not yet understand, that not all awakenings are endings. Some are transformations. When sunlight touches its surface, the energy seeps inward, melting ancient bonds, freeing gases long trapped in crystalline cages. Beneath the crust, voids open like lungs, and plumes escape into the cold vacuum. The pressure reshapes the comet, alters its spin, changes how light scatters from its dust. In this fragile exchange between ice and star, you witness chemistry becoming choreography. Each venting plume is a signature of temperature and time. Each change in motion, a whisper from matter remembering movement. Every rotation, every spiral of dust, a kind of language written in light. You think of it as a slow awakening, not just mechanical reaction, but an unfolding awareness written into physics itself. The same way seeds respond to the first warmth of spring. The same way your mind stirs when light filters through closed eyes. Energy translates into form, heat into motion, stillness into story. And so, while astronomers measure spectra and plot orbits, you watch differently. You see it as a metaphor for consciousness, the way something can sleep for eons and yet still hold the potential to stir, the way silence can conceal readiness. In this small object of ice and dust, you sense the universal rhythm, dormancy and renewal, loss and return. There is something profoundly human about its struggle against the void. It spins, vents, glows, and shifts, all while moving toward a destiny written only in mathematics. Its path through the solar system will be brief, a single loop through light before it drifts away again, back into the black ocean between the stars. And yet, in this fleeting moment, it changes everything we know. It reminds us that the universe is not quiet. It only seems so when we stop listening to the slow awakenings. You close your eyes and imagine the comet not as a rock, but as a thought, a dream cast adrift from one star's mind to another. Its vapor trails are memories dissolving in sunlight. Its faint glow, an echo of curiosity that refuses to fade. Perhaps we are not so different. We, too, drift in vastness, waiting for the right warmth to wake us. The scientists debate, is it breaking apart? Is it volatile rich? Or simply unstable? The data are inconclusive. The comet brightens unexpectedly, then dims again. For days, telescopes lose sight of it. When it reappears, it seems altered. Its coma is spread wide, diffuse, like breath on cold glass. Some think it is dying. Others, that it has merely changed phase, become something we cannot yet name. You sense a strange comfort in that uncertainty. Not every transformation needs to be understood. Not every awakening returns to what was before. Sometimes, the slow unraveling of one form becomes the beginning of another, invisible but real. And as the comet fades into the deepening dark, leaving behind only a thin trace of dust and light, you feel as though something in you has awakened too, something ancient, quiet, waiting. You think of how all things, stars, minds, and frozen travelers alike, share this rhythm, to rest, to stir, to move again. Somewhere beyond, another object drifts unseen, waiting for its turn in the light. And you wonder, softly, curiously, what else in the dark is just beginning to wake. It begins with numbers, always numbers. Astronomers gather their data, time, angle, brightness, velocity, each point a whisper from the deep, each line a thread drawn through the sky. They feed the comet's positions into their equations, tracing its arc through the solar system. It should move predictably, obedient to Newton's clean geometry. But it doesn't. The comet drifts where no formula expected. Its trajectory sways, then corrects, then sways again, a dance slightly out of rhythm. Computers run simulations, 1,000 possibilities, each subtly wrong. It is as though some invisible hand keeps nudging it off course, a reminder that not all motion is measurable. You imagine the comet as a slow dancer in a field of forces. Gravity pulls it inward. Sunlight pushes it outward. Jets of gas twist it sideways. Every burst of vapor from its surface shifts its balance, altering its path. These are called non-gravitational effects, delicate pushes from uneven outgassing. Small, but over time, they matter. They make a comet unpredictable, almost alive. And so, even the clean mathematics of motion bends a little when warmth touches ice. A moment's sunlight changes destiny. You watch the scientists respond. They adjust their models, add correction factors, refit their curves. They build new equations, new maps of uncertainty. Each iteration brings them closer, yet never close enough. The comet moves with a mind of its own, or rather, with the subtle logic of matter that refuses to be reduced to pure calculation. You begin to see why physics is not cold at all. It is tender, responsive, full of listening. To describe movement is to listen to how the universe breathes. In school, you learn about Newton's laws, the perfect simplicity of mass, force, and acceleration. You learn that the cosmos could be predicted, that a body in motion would follow its line forever unless disturbed. But in reality, disturbance is everywhere. No orbit is ever perfect. Every body is touched by something else. A photon here, a dust grain there, a ripple of radiation. Motion, you realize, is not the expression of solitude, but of relationship. The comet is a storyteller written in vectors and light. Its speed reveals its temperature. Its wobble tells of inner fractures. Its curve to the void reveals its age. Every variable is a heartbeat. Every perturbation, a sigh. It drifts between the certainty of mathematics and the improvisation of nature. You recall Kepler, who long ago mapped the planet's ellipses, searching for divine geometry. He wanted to find harmony, a music written in motion. When he discovered that planets do not circle perfectly but move in ellipses, he didn't call it imperfection. He called it beauty. The universe, he said, sings in ratios. You feel that music here, too, in the uncertain spiral of 3 Ice/Atlas, whose orbit refuses to be confined by our neat harmonies. Each calculation is a kind of faith, the belief that the next point will land where the math predicts. Each deviation is a whisper from something wilder, older than numbers. As the comet swings closer to the sun, it begins to accelerate. The equations tighten. They start to work again, briefly. Newton's gravity reasserts its rhythm. For a moment, you can predict the path precisely. This position tomorrow, that velocity next week. The satisfaction of alignment, the comfort of understanding. But then, another jet erupts from beneath the surface, and the path bends again. The comet reminds you that the laws are real, but so is chaos. Even perfect equations have limits. Even precision must bow to the unknown. You think of Lorenz, the meteorologist who once noticed how tiny changes in initial conditions could lead to vast differences in outcome. The butterfly effect. He found that the world is not mechanical, but sensitive. The same holds true here. A whisper of gas, a flake of dust, and suddenly the comet's future is rewritten. You begin to realize that the mathematics of movement is not about control. It is about humility. It is the art of watching patterns emerge, knowing they will always drift. Science, too, is a kind of orbit, circling truth, never landing, always refining. And beneath all that math, there is something human, the need to understand motion, perhaps because we are always moving ourselves. Around the sun, around the galaxy, around our own restless thoughts. Our paths, too, are influenced by forces unseen. Emotion, memory, curiosity. You see yourself in that comet, swayed by invisible pressures, pulled by gravity and light, uncertain but moving still. When you look at the data again, the numbers blur into something beautiful. Velocity becomes longing. Trajectory becomes trust. Error margin becomes wonder. Perhaps that is what equations truly are, ways of holding motion gently, without claiming to own it, to describe but not confine, to listen but not decide. Astronomers plot the comet's next return to interstellar space. They estimate the date, but every model disagrees slightly. Will it pass beyond Neptune's reach in a century, or 1,000 years sooner? The question becomes philosophical. What does it mean to know the path of something that resists prediction? You think of how music, too, is made of patterns that constantly escape themselves. A melody cannot stay still, or it ceases to be music. A comet cannot stop moving, or it ceases to be itself. The beauty lies in impermanence, in the act of motion, not the shape of its path. When night falls, you step outside. The air is cool, and the stars shimmer faintly. Somewhere out there, beyond all visible light, the comet continues its journey, its spin, its endless recalibration. You imagine its curve not as a line through space, but as a question drawn into the dark. You realize then that the mathematics of movement is not a map of certainty, but a meditation on change. It is the art of seeing stability in motion, of finding rhythm in unpredictability. To follow a comet is to learn patience. To right its orbit is to learn surrender. And as your eyes adjust to the dark, you begin to see the quiet correspondence between movement and meaning. The way every drift, every deviation, every flicker of dust is part of a larger story. You feel it in your breath, in your pulse, in the slow turning of the earth beneath your feet. The comet, the planet, you, all part of one vast equation, still being solved. And as you think of that, you can almost sense it again. The faint pull of something farther still, a deeper current that calls not just bodies but minds to move. It begins quietly, as most mysteries do, with something small that doesn't quite fit. The comet's trajectory drifts again, only slightly, but enough to trouble the equations. No matter how many corrections astronomers add, it keeps straying from where gravity alone says it should be. The pattern feels purposeful, like a pause, a breath, a decision. Yet there are no engines, no thrusters, no mind. Only rock, dust, and frozen gas. You watch the data unfold, and you feel a strange intimacy with its mystery, because the comet, in its silence, is revealing the subtler powers that move everything. Not through touch, but through presence. Forces with no fingerprints. Astronomers call them non-gravitational accelerations. They are the gentle, invisible hands that nudge an object without leaving marks. Some are known. Radiation pressure, the tiny push of sunlight striking its surface, outgassing, the venting of vapor from deep within the ice, and the Yarkovsky effect, where heat re-emitted unevenly from a rotating body produces a faint thrust. Each one is soft, almost nothing. Yet over time, their whispers accumulate into movement. You imagine standing on the surface of that comet. No sound, no air, no horizon. Only a faint warmth spreading beneath your boots as the sun's light begins to seep through. Slowly, ice beneath the crust softens, vaporizing into jets that burst from the shadows. Each eruption changes the comet's spin, its course, its balance. The universe, it seems, is always exhaling, even through stone. Yet even these explanations don't quite settle the matter. The comet's movement still doesn't fit perfectly. It's as though there's one more force at play, something that hides between the known ones, like silence between musical notes. You think of light, that restless traveler that behaves like both wave and particle. Light has no mass, yet it carries momentum. When it strikes a surface, it imparts an infinitesimal push, a photon's nudge, smaller than a whisper on the skin. This is radiation pressure, the faintest gesture of energy transferring direction, altering motion, shaping matter. In the empty cold of space, where nothing else interferes, even such a tiny push matters. You picture sunlight as a steady rain of invisible hands, touching the comet from all sides. Each photon leaves not a mark, but a motion, and in time, these billions of tiny gestures, unseen, unfelt, shift the course of worlds. There's a strange comfort in that idea. That light, the same thing that warms your face, can move entire mountains of rock and ice drifting through space. That illumination is not only to see, but to change. And that maybe, in its own way, light remembers where to go. Scientists test their models again. They add the radiative effects, the thermal recoil, the irregular outgassing jets. Their graphs come closer to reality, but still, something refuses to align. It's not chaos. It's character, as if the comet carries a history written into its mass. Some asymmetry from another star, some internal crack that releases gas unevenly, creating a rhythm that can't be repeated. And so, it moves with the memory of its making. You realize that even physics carries biography. The astronomers, ever cautious, do not speak of consciousness. They speak of data, of models, of uncertainty margins. But in their quiet tones, you hear something tender, an acknowledgement that nature often resists neat translation, that to describe movement is one thing, but to understand why it moves that way is another. There's always a residue of mystery. You close your eyes and picture how light, heat, and dust combine to guide the comet, each one invisible, each one essential. It feels less like control and more like conversation. The cosmos, whispering to itself. Forces that do not grasp, only invite. And you think, isn't everything moved by such invisible influences? Your thoughts by memories, your emotions by words unspoken, your body by forces you cannot name but feel deeply, the gravity of longing, the inertia of habit, the momentum of hope. Physics and feeling are not so different. Both describe what happens when something unseen begins to move something that can be seen. There's a quiet beauty in that realization, that the most powerful forces are the ones without edges or weight. They do not shout. They persuade, like light on a comet, or kindness in a human heart. The scientists begin to explore deeper models. Some propose the presence of hydrogen trapped inside the ice, invisible gas that sublimates without leaving the telltale signatures of water. Others wonder if dust ejection might create temporary sails that catch sunlight unevenly. Each explanation touches part of the truth, yet none completes the picture. The comet remains elusive, not because it hides, but because it's honest. It moves exactly as the universe tells it to, complex, interwoven, unhurried. You watch as the data flickers across screens, each line a story of motion written in mathematics. And it feels almost spiritual, this attempt to trace the invisible, because to calculate the unseeable is also to believe in it. Every formula here is an act of faith that reality can be felt through reason, that even what cannot be touched can still be known. You imagine those invisible forces as music, vibrating through the void, some deep and slow, like the bass notes of gravity, others light and shimmering, the treble of radiation and dust. Together, they compose a kind of cosmic symphony, shaping how every object drifts and spins. You, too, are part of that music. Every atom in your body responds to these same invisible notes. Every cell resonates with the quiet order of unseen forces. You realize then that the comet's mysterious drift is not a defiance of physics. It is physics in its purest form. It is the world reminding you that laws do not limit nature. They describe its dance. And sometimes, the dance is too intricate to be captured in one language alone. When the scientists publish their next paper, they admit something rare. There remains an unexplained acceleration, a phrase that sounds clinical but feels profound, as if the universe itself were leaning slightly forward, curious to see where it might go next. You imagine the comet continuing its slow, unpredictable flight, not lost but listening, guided by currents of light and heat, shaped by the breath of nothingness. Its motion becomes a kind of meditation, to move without knowing, to respond without resistance, to follow forces unseen. As you drift into your own stillness, you wonder, if light can push, can thought? If unseen forces can move stone, can curiosity move worlds? And what other hidden hands might guide what we do not yet understand? It begins, as all warmth does, with the sun, not as a flame, but as a wind, an endless sigh of particles flowing outward in every direction. The solar wind, they call it, a river of charged matter whispering through the silence between planets. It carries the sun's presence farther than its light can reach. You close your eyes and imagine it, invisible, weightless, but strong enough to sculpt the tails of comets, to shape magnetic fields, to hum quietly against the edges of worlds. This is not the wind you know on Earth, not the rush of air against your cheek, but something purer, finer, atoms stripped of their electrons, plasma streaming at hundreds of kilometers per second, carrying the heartbeat of a star. The Comet 3 I/Atlas feels it too. Its dust tail bends not because of gravity, but because of this silent push, this constant exhalation from the sun. Each grain of dust released from its surface catches the solar wind like a sail catching a current, and the comet begins to trail a luminous banner across the dark. You imagine the wind curling around it, sculpting it gently, as if tracing the memory of motion itself. The sun, you realize, never stops breathing. For billions of years, it has been exhaling its substance, not metaphor, but matter, protons and electrons born in the furnace of nuclear fusion, escaping the sun's magnetic grip, and flowing outward to the solar system. When they reach Earth, they dance with our magnetic field, weaving curtains of color across the poles. The aurora, our sky's reminder that we live inside the atmosphere of a star. You stand beneath that idea for a moment, feeling its weight and its wonder. You, too, live in the breath of the sun. Every signal your phone sends, every whisper of a radio wave, every shimmer of light from a leaf, all of it shaped by that endless flow of solar energy. It is both gentle and vast, intimate and immense. Scientists call the boundary where this breath ends a heliopause, the edge of the sun's influence, where the solar wind meets the wind from other stars. Beyond that border, interstellar space begins. But for now, 3I/Atlas drifts within it, still wrapped in the sun's invisible touch, still shaped by its warmth and will. You picture how the comet must look now. a dark body glowing faintly in reflected sunlight, surrounded by a faint mist of ionized gas. The solar wind interacts with those ions, stripping and bending them into a long, straight tail, a line of blue light that points directly away from the sun. It's called the ion tail, and it's different from the dust one, sharper, more electric. It reveals not what the comet releases, but what the sun's breath takes away. You think about how the sun gives and takes in equal measure. Its warmth brings life to Earth, but can strip atmospheres from smaller worlds. It illuminates, but also erodes. It sustains, but also tests. And perhaps that's what power truly is. Not domination, but constant exchange. As you drift deeper into thought, you feel the symmetry between yourself and the comet. You, too, are shaped by invisible currents, sunlight, gravity, time, and emotion. Every day, photons that left the sun 8 minutes ago touch your skin, stirring chemistry in your cells. Vitamin D, warmth, wakefulness, all small miracles born from fusion 93 million miles away. You carry a trace of that same light within your blood, your breath, your being. But the sun is not steady. Its surface flickers and flares. Magnetic loops twist, storing tension until they snap, releasing flares and coronal mass ejections, great bursts of plasma that roar through space. When these storms reach Earth, they can ripple through our magnetosphere, disrupt satellites, power grids, even the rhythm of the ionosphere. The solar wind is gentle most days, but sometimes it becomes a storm. Still, even that violence is creative. The same storms that threaten technology also paint the sky with light, emerald and violet curtains sweeping across the poles. Every aurora is a visible breath of the sun-made art. Every shimmer is proof that invisible things can still touch you. You imagine how 3i/Atlas must experience those storms. Not with sight, not with sound, but to the trembling of its ions, through the reshaping of its tail. Perhaps it hums faintly in electromagnetic frequencies, a vibration too high for ears, too deep for instruments. The sun speaks to it through movement, and the comet replies by changing shape. All motion, you realize, is a kind of conversation. The more you think of it, the more the distinction between life and not life seems to blur. Isn't everything that responds to its environment in some small way alive? 3i/Atlas turns toward the sun not by choice, but by physics. Yet its reactions, melting, venting, shimmering, are like breath, like instinct. Perhaps life is simply matter learning to listen more closely. And you, lying beneath the same sun, are doing the same. Listening, feeling, letting unseen forces move you. The solar wind that bends comet tails is the same one that once shaped the early Earth, stripping away primordial gases, helping create the balance that made air possible. Without it, you might not be here at all. The universe, it seems, is made of conversations between energy and matter. Each pulse of light, each gust of solar wind, another word in the great dialogue of existence. Even in silence, there is speaking. Even in stillness, there is exchange. You look toward the sky and realize that every shimmer, every glow, every comet's tail is a physical memory of that dialogue. Sunlight sculpting substance, energy meeting resistance. And somewhere in that interaction, there is meaning, a meaning not written in words, but in warmth. The comet continues to drift, carried by the breath of the sun. You picture it sailing through plasma streams, its tail stretching, shimmering, always pointing away from source. It cannot look back. It can only move forward, guided by the pressure of light, the hush of radiation. And you feel something gentle in that image, the way progress so often means surrendering to invisible currents. Perhaps we, too, are guided this way, moved not by what we plan, but by what touches us quietly, persistently, like light on the skin. Perhaps we are all drifting through fields of influence, learning to trust the unseen. And as the comet passes deeper into sunlight, you sense the next question beginning to glow. If the sun's breath can shape the paths of comets and worlds, what hidden rhythms might shape the breath of the sun itself? It begins as a flicker in your imagination, the idea that movement might mean something. You watch 3i/Atlas drift, tumble, flare, and dim, its behavior as unpredictable as breath. It curves through sunlight like a dancer uncertain of its rhythm. Sometimes it speeds up, sometimes it slows, sometimes it turns its face, if a comet could have won, toward the sun as if drawn by longing. And somewhere deep in that watching, you sense a shift in how you perceive it. You're no longer observing an object. You are listening to a performer. A mindless rock does not sway with rhythm, but this one seems to. You remind yourself that meaning is easy to invent, that humans see faces in clouds and messages in static. But still, you can't help wondering, what if the pattern means something beyond mathematics? Astronomers measure its velocity, map its tumbling, calculate the torque. Equations unfold like delicate origami. Angular momentum, non-gravitational acceleration, the effect of sunlight pushing on dust and ice. But the numbers don't quiet the feeling. Each data point feels less like explanation and more like heartbeat. In your mind's eye, the comet is alive with possibility. Its long arc through the solar system resembles a migration of a creature tracing ancestral paths through an invisible sea. The way its outgassing flares in the warmth of sunlight looks like respiration, a sigh after deep sleep. Even its unpredictability, that refusal to behave like anything known, feels alive in its defiance. You recall how ancient cultures once saw motion as spirit. The Greeks spoke of celestial spheres animated by divine fire. The Chinese described the heavens as breathing. In Polynesian myth, comets were living omens, skyfish swimming through eternity. Perhaps, long before science gave you formulas, you already knew this instinctively. To move is to live. But what does life mean in the language of physics? You imagine a checklist: metabolism, replication, adaptation, homeostasis. 3, I/Atlas fits none of them. It does not feed or grow. It does not repair itself. It does not learn. And yet it reacts. It changes in response to its environment. Sunlight altering its surface, gravity bending its path. It shows a kind of sensitivity, not consciousness, but a quiet responsiveness to the universe's breath. Science draws lines to separate the living from the non-living. But in the cold emptiness of space, those lines blur. Stars forge the elements of DNA. Radiation mutates molecules. Cosmic dust gathers into complex chains that one day may stir with their own awakening. Everywhere, the universe rehearses the steps of life long before life appears. You think of other illusions the cosmos offers. Jupiter's storms, for instance, vast and swirling, lasting centuries, yet looking uncannily like the eye of a creature watching from the deep. Or Saturn's rings, which ripple with wave patterns that resemble the pulse of a heartbeat. Even the sun, with its churning magnetic loops, feels less like a machine and more like a colossal organism breathing plasma. Perhaps life is not something the universe contains, but something it performs. Perhaps motion itself, this constant play of attraction and release, push and pull, orbit and escape, is its language of being. You watch the light curve data on your screen, tiny variations in brightness that hint at shape and spin. Every few hours, the comet's reflected sunlight dips and rises, like a pulse measured in photons. It's nothing more than rotation, a body turning endlessly through the void, but to you, it feels like time measured in heartbeat. You recall a phrase from an old astrophysics paper, non-gravitational perturbations. A clinical term, yet poetic when you let it settle. Non-gravitational, as if something other than gravity touched it. A whisper from sunlight, a push from gas, a memory from before it entered the solar system. Perturbation, not chaos, but gentle disturbance, the way a thought might ripple through a dreaming mind. You imagine the comet as a mind dreaming in motion. Each spin, each flicker, each burst of dust is a neuron firing in the brain of the cosmos. A signal that travels not through flesh or wire, but through the void, encoded in trajectory and temperature, in reflected light and thermal glow. And yet, beneath the poetry, the science hums softly. You know that the apparent intelligence of 3I/Atlas is a trick of physics, that jets of vapor can tilt a comet's spin, that uneven heating can mimic choice. You understand equations that describe it, but understanding does not banish wonder. It deepens it. Because even in knowing, you feel the awe of a mechanism that moves with such elegance it fools the mind into believing it has a soul. There's a beauty in being fooled by the cosmos. To project curiosity onto motion is to admit your own, to see in the comet a mirror of your hunger for meaning. Every orbit, every flick of its path, becomes a reflection of your own restless thought. The human tendency to animate what you love, to find life wherever there is motion. In a sense, Three Eyes Atlas is alive, not biologically, but symbolically. It is alive in your perception of it, alive in the attention you give it. It exists in the dialogue between its movement and your imagination. Like a story, it comes alive only when someone listens. The telescope becomes a translator between realities, the mechanical and the mystical, the factual and the emotional. Through its lenses, you watch a rock behave like a question. It neither confirms nor denies your interpretations. It simply continues moving. As you sit there, the room dim around you, you realize that this illusion, this gentle trick of lifelike behavior, might be the universe's way of teaching humility. You cannot tell where the boundary lies between observer and observed, between the lifeless and the living, between motion and meaning. You whisper to yourself that perhaps life is not defined by chemistry, but by attention, that anything which draws awareness into relationship, even a cold, tumbling rock from another star, participates in a kind of shared existence. And as Three Eyes Atlas drifts farther from the sun, its tail thinning into the dark, you feel a quiet sadness, like watching a thought dissolve. The illusion of life fades, but the question remains, soft, echoing, unanswerable. When does behavior become life? And what, then, does that make the stars that move without rest? You remember when it first happened, before Three Eyes Atlas, before the world knew what to make of interstellar wanderers. It was October 2017, and the Pan-STARRS telescope in Hawaii caught a flicker of something faint, moving fast. At first, it looked like any ordinary asteroid. But within days, astronomers noticed the impossible. Its trajectory was not bound by the sun. It came from outside the solar system, and it was leaving just as swiftly as it came. They called it Oumuamua, Hawaiian for a messenger from afar, arriving first. You whisper the word aloud. It feels gentle, reverent, a sound meant for both welcome and wonder. Like Three Eyes Atlas, Oumuamua moved with a kind of grace that numbers could not fully describe. It accelerated slightly as it left the sun, though no jets of gas were seen. It tumbled end over end, its brightness flickering as it spun. Some said it looked like a shard, long and thin. Others imagined it as a pancake, flat and wide. Its true shape remains unconfirmed, hidden in the blur of reflected light. You picture it drifting through the darkness, silent, slow, impossibly ancient, a sliver of something not meant for the system. Astronomers tried to reconstruct its story. Perhaps it was once a fragment from another star's shattered planet. Perhaps it was an icy relic ejected long ago, wandering interstellar space for millions, maybe billions of years. To cross the distance between stars is to travel through loneliness itself. A journey of unimaginable time, without fuel, without purpose, guided only by the quiet laws of motion. Still, there was something about Oumuamua that unsettled even the most rational minds. It behaved too cleanly, too perfectly. Its acceleration did not match what sunlight alone should cause. There was no visible tail, no comb of dust. It seemed to glide rather than drift, as though obeying a will rather than physics. And so began the speculation, both cautious and wild. Some scientists suggested it might be a hydrogen iceberg, sublimating invisibly. Others proposed it could be made of exotic ices that evaporate without leaving a visible trace. But a few, quietly, curiously, asked a more daring question. What if it wasn't natural at all? Not a spaceship exactly, but something once crafted, a relic, a sail, a fragment of technology so old it had become a fossil of purpose. You can feel how such an idea both thrills and troubles the mind, because it blurs the comfort of distance, the assumption that intelligence is only found here on this blue world. To imagine Oumuamua as a message, even an accidental one, is to feel the boundary of human solitude tremble. But the scientists, the patient ones, remind themselves that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So they turn again to mathematics. They model sunlight pressure, thermal recoil, rotational dynamics. They map every photon reflected, every subtle nudge from invisible forces. Slowly, the mystery is softened into probability and yet not fully erased. You find a strange peace in that. The universe, it seems, allows both science and one to coexist, not as rivals, but as partners in curiosity. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear Oumuamua's path as music, a note sliding upward as it approached, fading as it departed. A cosmic echo, the sound of something brushing against the edges of human understanding. You imagine how quiet it must be out there. No air, no vibration, only motion through vacuum. A kind of stillness that makes sound unnecessary. You wonder if Oumuamua noticed the light of our sun growing and fading as it passed, or if it even remembers where it came from. Astronomers continue to compare it with 3I/Atlas, discovered years later. Both interstellar, both uninvited, both performing the same strange dance of acceleration and silence. Some think they share a lineage, fragment from the same system, or siblings born from similar chaos. Others say it's coincidence, the kind that only feels meaningful when viewed from the smallness of human perspective. Yet the coincidence feels poetic. Two visitors arriving a few years apart, as if the universe were sending reminders in rhythm. One messenger first, then another, slightly different, carrying a continuation of the same unspoken sentence. Perhaps these are not accidents, you think, but rehearsals. The cosmos practicing communication in a language you have not yet learned to read. In some sense, both Oumuamua and 3I/Atlas are storytellers. They speak not in words, but in trajectories, in the arc of motion, in the light they reflect, in the questions they leave behind. Each is a fragment of a larger sentence written across time and space. When you study them, you are not just looking outward, you are listening inward, to your own need to find meaning, to the ancient instinct that whispers that everything moving must be alive with intention. Oumuamua has long since vanished from sight. It drifts now in the darkness between stars, where sunlight cannot reach and human eyes will never follow. But its presence lingers in the equations and the arguments, in the soft unease it left behind. It changed how humanity listens to the sky. It reminded you that the universe is not a closed system of knowledge, but a conversation still unfolding. You think about how scientists turn toward the next visitor, 2I/Borisov, then later 3I/Atlas, as if awaiting echoes of that first message. Each discovery felt like the return of a memory. Different form, same essence. And now you begin to wonder, what if this pattern continues? What if the universe is teaching you, gently, to expect the unexpected? Oumuamua was the first voice. 3I/Atlas, perhaps the second, and maybe, somewhere beyond the veil of night, a third is already on its way, carrying the next verse of the same cosmic poem. You look up, tracing invisible lines between these travelers in your mind, and feel a deep, wordless gratitude, not for the answers they offer, but for the questions they awaken, questions that make you look inward, outward, and beyond, all at once. Because in the end, it's not the certainty that soothes you, but the wondering itself, the knowledge that something still lies uncharted, still waiting to be understood. And as your thoughts drift toward sleep, you feel the echo of Oumuamua fading into distance, whispering something almost comprehensible, almost human. Something that sounds like an invitation. You drift closer to the traveler now. 3I/Atlas, the third interstellar visitor, the quiet messenger from somewhere beyond the known. Its surface looks like ash and ice interwoven, a fragile mosaic of history held together by time. Dust clings to it, fine, ancient, unassuming. But in that dust lies a story older than worlds. Each grain a page written by fire, explosion, and silence. You think of dust as something small, insignificant. Yet in truth, it is the universe's great historian. Dust remembers what light forgets. It carries traces of the first stars, the ones that burned bright and died before Earth ever existed. It drifts through galaxies, collecting signatures of collisions, births, and deaths. To hold dust in your imagination is to cradle time itself. Scientists know this too. When they look at a fine powder coating an asteroid or comet, they see not debris but archives. Those specks are made of elements forged in stellar furnaces: carbon, silicon, iron, oxygen, magnesium. Each atom was once part of a star's heart, fused in the unimaginable heat of nuclear reactions. When a massive star reaches its end, it cannot sustain itself. Gravity wins. The core collapses and the outer layers explode outward in a supernova, a brief, furious brilliance that scatters elements across space. Those atoms cool, condense, and gather into new clouds of gas and dust. From those clouds, new stars are born, new planets, and perhaps new travelers like 3I/Atlas. You realize that in some deep, physical way, this visitor carries the fingerprints of those long-dead stars. Just as you do, the calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the oxygen that fills your lungs, all were once part of an ancient star. When you breathe the remnants of supernovae. When you touch the earth, you touch the cooled ashes of cosmic fire. Every movement of your body is a continuation of stellar memory. And so, as you gaze at 3I/Atlas gliding silently between the planets, you begin to see not a stranger, but relative. Not something alien, but something familiar in an older, deeper sense. The dust on its surface and the dust in your cells share the same ancestry. The difference is only in the journey. It has wandered farther. You have merely stayed. You picture the moment when sunlight strikes one of those grains of dust. The photons, little packets of light, scatter, bouncing toward distant eyes and telescopes. In that light is encoded information, color, temperature, composition. Astronomers read these signals like whispers through the void, learning what kind of atoms live there, what kind of star once birthed them. Spectroscopy, they call it. The study of light's secret grammar. Every element has its own pattern of absorption, a unique barcode written in color. Hydrogen leaves one mark, carbon another, oxygen a third. By spreading the light into its spectrum, scientists can see the universe's inventory of memories. You find something poetic in that. The idea that light itself is a librarian, carrying records across unimaginable distances. Even now, the sunlight reflecting off 3I/Atlas is telling a story to anyone who listens. And what a story it is. A story of exile and return, of dust traveling through darkness, of atoms learning to remember their past by being part of something new. You think of the human body again. How strange it is that your atoms once belonged to other forms, clouds, rocks, oceans, perhaps even living things long extinct. You are, in a very literal sense, a collection of memories. Matter is not destroyed. It changes shape, form, and purpose. The same carbon that fuels your breath may once have drifted to the tail of a comet or burned in the atmosphere of a dying world. 3I/Atlas, too, is made of borrowed material. It carries traces of cosmic collisions, of magnetic storms and foreign suns, of distant planetary dust that once circled another star. The universe is a recycler of stories. Nothing is lost, only rearranged. You begin to see how memory, in the cosmic sense, does not belong to consciousness alone. The universe itself remembers, not through thought, but through structure, through atoms that retain their origin, through molecules that preserve the echoes of their birth. And perhaps you think, that is what life really is, the universe's way of remembering itself. When a star explodes, it forgets. When life forms, it recalls. There is comfort in this continuity, the thought that no part of you or 3I/Atlas ever truly disappears. Everything becomes something else. The same materials, endlessly recombined, endlessly expressive. You imagine the dust on 3I/Atlas as a kind of skin, whether by radiation, brushed by light, peeled and renewed across eons. Some grains may have detached along the journey, becoming meteoric threads through our solar system. Perhaps, in time, one of those fragments will fall into Earth's atmosphere, burning for a moment before joining the soil. And there, perhaps, it will blend with the minerals that feed plants, that nourish your body, that one day return to dust again. The cycle feels eternal and yet intimate. When you inhale, you are taking in atoms that once belonged to the same story. When you exhale, you send them onward, back into the great exchange. Dust is the smallest unit of belonging and the largest. You recall that some scientists now study interstellar grains caught in the upper atmosphere, trapped in aerogels by NASA's Stardust mission. They have found traces of rare isotopes, unusual versions of elements that could only have formed in distant stars. Even these particles, captured for study, remain enigmatic, their stories incomplete. Like 3I/Atlas, they are travelers that refuse to fully reveal where they've been. Perhaps memory, even in atoms, has its limits. Perhaps forgetting is also part of the universe's rhythm, a necessary clearing that allows new patterns to form. If everything remembered perfectly, there would be no room for change. You wonder if 3I/Atlas remembers its origin at all, or if it moves purely by the laws of momentum and chance, carrying history without awareness. And yet, as you watch it turn, you feel a quiet kinship, awareness or not. Its presence speaks of continuity, the persistence of what once was transformed but unbroken. The visitor glides on, its dust shimmering faintly in the sunlight, like the surface of memory itself. You realize that even your thoughts, fleeting and tangible, are made possible by atoms forged in those long-gone stars. Every neuron's flicker is powered by cosmic ancestry. You are not simply looking at starlight. You are made of it, and that realization softens something in you, a reminder that separation is mostly illusion. 3I/Atlas, the sun, the cold dust drifting through interstellar space, all are variations of the same enduring pattern. You close your eyes and feel the deep rhythm of that truth. Creation, transformation, return. The breath of the cosmos, moving through time. And as the thought settles, you begin to sense another question rising from the quiet. One not about what the dust remembers, but about what holds it all together. Because if everything comes from the same source, what invisible threads bind it still? The visitor drifts farther, its light dimming, and you sense that answer waiting, not in memory, but in magnetism. The night stretches across the desert, wide and endless. You stand among the silent sentinels, enormous radio dishes that tilt their faces toward the stars. They move slowly, almost reverently, like sunflowers turning toward invisible light. Around you, the air is still. Only the faint hum of machinery and the pulse of your own heartbeat keep time. Somewhere beyond, signals travel or do not. The dishes listen for them anyway. You feel the patience in their design. They do not demand. They do not insist on answers. They simply wait, letting the universe speak in its own rhythm. Each curve of metal is tuned to receive whispers across distances, so vast that time itself begins to blur. These instruments are not really listening for voices, not in the human sense. They're listening for patterns, for order hidden in randomness, for pauses too long to measure. Silence, it turns out, is one of the most informative things the cosmos offers. When a radio telescope hears nothing, that nothing still carries meaning. It tells you what is not there, what frequencies are empty, what motions are absent, what physics continues unperturbed. In the hush between cosmic rays and background noise, scientists trace outlines of galaxies, the shape of hydrogen clouds, even a faint afterglow of the Big Bang itself. It is a strange kind of music, one where the missing notes are the melody. You imagine a universe as an orchestra playing to an empty hall, its instruments vibrating in the dark. Some strings hum with stars, some percussion beats with pulsars, and in the spaces between the quiet, the rest, lies the true structure of song. To hear it, you must quiet every other sound. Your mind drifts back to the first great silences humanity encountered. Before telescopes, before electricity, there was a night sky, filled not with noise but with meaning. People looked upward and heard the silence as something divine, as if the cosmos itself were holding its breath. Then came radio astronomy, a new form of listening, and that silence began to speak in frequencies and spectra. When the first signals arrived from quasars, they seemed like static at first, meaningless noise. But within that noise was rhythm, periodicity, a kind of heartbeat across billions of light years. You realize that even chaos can become a message when someone is willing to wait long enough to hear its pattern. In the control room nearby, scientists sit in dim red light. Screens flicker with graphs that look like mountains and valleys of sound. But what they are reading is not sound at all. It is data, transposed into something the mind can hold. Peaks mean bursts of energy. Valleys mean quiet skies. And the long, flat stretches, the silent parts, are where mystery hides. You think about how much of your own life exists in silence. The pauses between breaths. The stillness before you fall asleep. The moments after loss. before words can find you again. Silence, like the universe, is rarely empty. It is a place where things reorganize themselves, unseen. Even the cosmic microwave background, the afterglow creation, was silence made visible. It hummed faintly across the entire sky, a leftover warmth from the moment the universe became transparent. It wasn't a sound we could hear, but it carried the first echo of everything that would one day sing, spin, and speak. And now, telescopes listen for the opposite, a silence that might mean something new has arrived. When Oumuamua passed through, some wondered if its strange acceleration could have been a kind of message, a mechanical whisper hidden in motion rather than sound. Dishes turned toward it, expecting perhaps a ping, a coded pulse, a brief shimmer of intelligence. None came, but that quiet became its own kind of signal. The silence told us, if this was a messenger, it spoke in gravity, not in radio. There's a kind of serenity in that. Not every silence needs to be filled. Sometimes the act of listening is enough. You step back into the open air. The stars shimmer above like a million unplayed notes. The dishes have stopped moving for the moment, fixed in position, as if holding a collective breath. The desert wind carries no sound but its own whisper. You close your eyes and realize that you are, in your own way, a radio dish too, a receiver of faint impressions, stray thoughts, the soft hum of existence. You listen to your body, the steady rhythm of blood, the low murmur of breath, the distant echo of thought. Within that quiet, there are patterns too, neuronal flares, molecular shifts, quantum murmurs. Each is silent and as full of meaning as a galaxy's hum. To listen well, you understand, is to accept that silence is not nothing. It is an invitation. The universe is still speaking, but not always in a language you can decode. Sometimes it speaks through gravity, sometimes through light, and sometimes it simply withdraws, letting you hear your own mind reflected back, like an echo bouncing off a distant wall of time. You begin to hear a subtle rhythm in the silence, like waves against the shore of infinity. The cosmos is breathing, slowly, endlessly, and you are within that breath. Every listening ear, every quiet telescope, every waiting mind adds another layer to the great hush, a network of awareness stretched across light years. In the deep, immeasurable quiet, you feel a connection not of words, but of attention. And in that attention, something begins to awaken, a sense that silence might not just be the absence of voice, but the presence of understanding. You open your eyes, and for a long time, nothing moves. The dishes keep listening, as they always have. Somewhere beyond the stars, perhaps another ear, another mind does the same. Between you, the silence stretches, wide, gentle, and alive. And as a thought settles in, another question drifts softly through your mind, almost like a signal itself. If silence can speak, what might light remember? You begin to notice that the quiet of space is not as motionless as it seems. Even silence, when you listen closely enough, has a pulse. Everywhere you look, there is rhythm, the spin of planets, the flicker of pulsars, the swell and fade of starlight. The universe moves like a living organism, inhaling and exhaling across eons. Galaxies rotate like slow heartbeats. Suns throb in brightness. Magnetic fields ripple through invisible seas. What looks still from afar is always, secretly, alive with pattern. You remember the desert telescopes, their dishes turning with mathematical grace, chasing signals that often turn out to be rhythms, not random, but recurring, predictable, structured. When astronomers first detected radio pulses from deep space, they thought for a brief moment it might be communication, until they realized they had found pulsars, neutron stars spinning hundreds of times per second, each rotation marking time like a cosmic metronome. Even the most violent stars, you realize, keep perfect rhythm. And so in stillness, there is order, an unbroken pulse connecting everything. The sun, too, beats in cycles. Its surface breathes with magnetic storms, flares, and sunspots, an 11-year rhythm that affects the light-bathing Earth. The solar wind strengthens and softens, shaping auroras, charging particles, shifting the heartbeat of the sky. To live within such cycles is to be part of the rhythm yourself. Your own body, even in sleep, mirrors these celestial patterns. The The slow pulse of your blood, the rise and fall of breath, the nightly drift into dreaming. Inside you, cells divide in circadian tempo, and neurons flash in electric intervals like distant stars. You begin to see that life is not the opposite of stillness. It is the pattern hidden inside it. Perhaps 3 I/Atlas. 2. Follows a rhythm we have not yet learned to measure. Its strange acceleration, its gliding path. Maybe it moves to a cosmic beat we cannot yet hear. After all, not every rhythm is audible or visible. Some reveal themselves only when you learn to wait long enough to recognize their return. Astronomers study light curves, brightness over time, to trace hidden motion. When the light dips, a planet passes. When it flickers, a rotation begins. The data forms wave-like graphs, like an ECG reading of a star's heartbeat. Every celestial body, no matter how distant, writes its own rhythm into the dark. You imagine 3 I/Atlas as a note in this vast symphony, one more beat in a melody stretching between galaxies. Its passing may be fleeting, but its motion participates in the greater choreography. The same way a falling leaf follows the wind's invisible rhythm. Unaware, it is part of seasoned song. Patterns are not merely repetitions. They are memory given motion. The universe seems to remember how to move, how to return to equilibrium, how to oscillate between forces. Gravity pulls, inertia resists, and in their eternal tension, creation finds balance. A pendulum never argues with gravity. It simply learns to swing. Perhaps that is what all existence is doing. Swinging, vibrating, returning. Even the atoms that make up your body do this. Inside every molecule, electrons hum around nuclei in specific frequencies. You, in essence, are made of music, a set of resonances fine-tuned by evolution to keep time with your planet's turning, your heart's rhythm, your sleep's slow cycles. You wonder, if the universe's rhythm, who or what keeps the beat? There is no conductor here, only the interplay of laws. But the result feels composed, intentional, beautiful. Entropy spreads, yes, but even decay follows patterns. Radioactive half-lives ticking with atomic precision, like seconds in a clock too small for the human eye. Stillness, it seems, is never truly still. In deep space, even the emptiest regions hum faintly with cosmic microwave background. Radiation left from the birth of time. It is the universe's oldest rhythm, the faint after-echo of expansion, stretched thin by billions of years, but still beating softly everywhere at once. You swim in it without knowing, wrapped in the background pulse of creation itself. You think of the Voyager spacecraft, still moving outward, still transmitting data decades after launch. Its power wanes, its heartbeat slows, but it remains in rhythm with its mission, a long exhale into infinity. One day its signal will fade entirely. But even that silence will be part of the pattern, another wave dissolving into the sea of space. Perhaps 3 I/Atlas carries some echo of such persistence, a quiet defiance against randomness. You picture it now, gliding between the stars, sunlight glinting faintly off its dust. From this distance, its path is elegant, serene. But beneath that calm, forces intertwine. Solar radiation, gravitational nudges, the dance of thermal recoil, tiny asymmetries that produce movement, that transform stillness into drift. It is not chaos. It is choreography. Everything, you realize, dances differently depending on scale. The electron hums. The planet spins. The star pulses. The galaxy rotates. And the universe expands. Each motion is a kind of breath, a pulse beneath the illusion of stillness. You sit quietly and feel your own breath match it. The slow inhale and exhale syncing with the imagined heartbeat of the cosmos. The rhythm is too vast to count, but you sense it nonetheless, as if your body remembers something older than itself. Maybe that is what rhythm truly is, memory that refuses to die. And if all things remember their motion, then perhaps 3 I/Atlas, too, remembers where it came from. Perhaps it carries the beat of a star long gone, or the pattern of a system that once sang. Even in exile, it might still keep time at a home that no longer exists. That thought brings a strange comfort. The universe forgets nothing. It only transforms memory into motion, then into silence, then into motion again. Your heartbeat slows. The night around you feels less empty now, more alive with hidden structure. You begin to understand. Stillness is not the absence of rhythm, but the point where every rhythm briefly meets, a pause before the next breath of creation. Above, stars blink in patient cadence. Beneath your skin, blood whispers its ancient pattern. Somewhere beyond, Three Eyes / Atlas continues to move, drawn not by purpose but by the quiet persistence of rhythm itself. And you can almost hear it, the low, steady pulse beneath everything that is, a rhythm so vast that to feel it is to belong. And in that belonging, a new curiosity begins to stir, a wondering about what drives these rhythms to keep repeating, to renew themselves even after chaos. You wonder softly, as the rhythm fades into stillness once more, does every pulse, in the end, seek harmony? You've been told all your life that living things are easy to recognize. They move, they breathe, they grow, they consume energy and reproduce. But the longer you look outward, toward things that do not fit so neatly into those boxes, the softer the line becomes between what lives and what merely exists. Three Eyes / Atlas drifts through space like a question mark wrapped in stone and dust. It does not breathe, it does not eat, yet it changes. When it nears a star, its frozen gases awaken. It vents and exhales, reshaping its surface, altering its trajectory. When the heat fades, it returns to stillness, dormant but not destroyed. Its existence is a cycle of dormancy and release, not unlike the sleep and waking of a hibernating creature. And so, you wonder, does it live? Scientists have spent centuries trying to find life, but the answers slip like light through open fingers. One definition says life is that which grows, reproduces, and evolves. Another insists it must contain cells, or genetic material, or metabolism. But there are exceptions everywhere you look. Viruses, for instance, occupy the in-between. They cannot reproduce on their own, cannot eat or move, yet they can hijack the machinery of cells to make copies of themselves. They adapt, evolve, and outweat defenses, alive when inside a host, inert when not. Are they life, or simply information that borrows life from others? And if a virus is a whisper of life, then what about something like a comet or an interstellar object like Three Eyes / Atlas, changing shape and path in response to energy from a star? Perhaps it, too, borrows vitality from light. You begin to see that life might not be a gate with a lock, but a landscape, a gradient between being and becoming. On one end, pure matter, on the other, consciousness. And between them, all the shimmering possibilities of semi-life. Things that react, adapt, transform. Consider crystals. They grow. They replicate their own structure, aligning atoms into ordered shapes that heal and extend themselves when broken. Snowflakes form in unique but lawful ways, born of temperature, pressure, and chance. No two alike, yet all obeying the same hidden geometry. Are they alive? Not in the biological sense. But something in them feels alive in pattern, in purpose. Even the earth behaves in ways that mimic living systems. Volcanoes act as lungs, releasing gases from deep within. The oceans circulate nutrients like blood. The atmosphere balances itself in feedback loops of carbon and oxygen, heat and water, a vast metabolic flow. The scientist James Lovelock once called this the Gaia hypothesis, the idea that Earth behaves as a self-regulating organism, its parts working in concert to maintain conditions favorable for life. Not a being, perhaps, but a being-like system. And if a planet can act alive without truly being alive, might a comet do the same? You imagine Three Eyes / Atlas as a traveler that carries seeds of chemistry, not biology, molecules forged in ancient clouds, preserved in ice. When it brushes close to warmth, those frozen compounds melt and mix, forming fleeting, reactive cocktails that may have once reigned upon young worlds like yours. Scientists believe that comets may have delivered the first ingredients of life to Earth, water, amino acids, organic carbon, before the first cell divided. There was chemistry, and chemistry, when given enough time and freedom, starts to look suspiciously like intention. Perhaps life did not begin at all. Perhaps it continued, from the movement of molecules to the cooperation of systems to the awareness of minds. You think of how your own body is built from things that were once not alive. Atoms that came from stars, molecules from oceans, minerals from mountains. What brought them together was not magic. It was pattern, persistence, energy flowing through matter until the dance could sustain itself. Maybe life is what happens when energy refuses to stop moving through matter. Even now, scientists try to find universal definitions. NASA's working one is careful and broad. Life is a self-sustaining chemical system capable of Darwinian evolution. Yet even that, you realize, excludes possibilities, machines that might one day evolve, or alien forms of organization that do not rely on carbon or water at all. So the boundary remains porous. Life as we know it is only one dialect in a universal language of complexity. You recall the robotic probe sent to Mars, their instruments sniffing for methane, searching for organics, drilling for clues. Each mission redefines what we mean by alive. A chemical imbalance in an atmosphere might be enough. A pattern of reactions repeating over time could count. Even a self-correcting feedback system, like a comet adjusting its path from solar heat, might whisper something lifelike. Maybe the question is not what counts as alive, but what does aliveness feel like to the universe? You think of the microbes that thrive in boiling vents, in acid pools, in frozen deserts. Life, it seems, is less a fragile spark than a stubborn rhythm that adapts to every environment it meets. It's as if the cosmos itself wants to be alive, to test every possible shape of persistence. And perhaps that's what you're seeing in 3I/Atlas. Persistence in motion, adaptation in silence. It may not have a heartbeat, but it responds to warmth. It may not think, but it remembers heat and cold in the language of sublimation and drift. It may not speak, but it leaves trails of gas that record its changing states, messages written in vapor. In that sense, it behaves less like a rock and more like a story, rewritten with every encounter, shaped by forces it does not control, yet carry within it a continuity that resists erasure. Is that not, in its own way, a form of life? You begin to wonder if life is not something that begins, but something that accumulates, a layering of patterns that grows more self-aware as it learns to sustain itself. From the chemical dance of early Earth to the circuits of an AI, from the drift of dust to the flight of birds, from a comet's solar whisper to the rhythm of a human heart. Perhaps it is all part of one long continuum of becoming. And what if intelligence, too, is not a property, but a pattern that emerges when matter begins to listen to itself? 3I/Atlas, passing through your solar system, does not seem intelligent, yet its motion inspires thought. Its presence stirs curiosity, analysis, emotion. In you, in others, in minds that imagine meaning where there may be none. And so it becomes part of the chain, a non-living thing giving rise to living wonder. Perhaps the true sign of life is not found in the object, but in its capacity to awaken awareness elsewhere. You look up, and for a moment, everything around you, the air, the stars, the memory of sunlight on your skin, seems alive in that broader sense. Not individual organisms, but one vast system of reactions and reflections, endlessly aware itself through the beings that emerge within it. You breathe slowly, realizing that to define life is to separate it, and maybe separation is the only thing that isn't alive. Stillness stretches before you again. 3I/Atlas moves on, and you feel the echo of its motion within you, a faint reminder that perhaps what counts as alive is not a question of form, but flow. Somewhere in that flow, intelligence begins to take shape, the ability to recognize itself. And you wonder, softly, as the visitor fades into the dark beyond, if life and mind are both continuums, then where does awareness truly begin? Motion is a language older than words. Before sound, before life, before memory, there was movement, the first flicker of a particle, the first ripple of energy across the silent vacuum, began a conversation that has never stopped. You drift through this quiet dialogue now, tracing arcs and spirals, pauses and accelerations, as if following the handwriting of creation itself. Every object you see, comet, planet, star, or cloud, carries a rhythm. Each obeys the grammar of gravity, the syntax of inertia, the pauses of resistance. To an untrained eye, these are just forces at play. But to you, listening in the language of motion, they are sentences written in the shape of time. A comet, for example, doesn't merely move. It narrates a story with every approach and retreat. Its elliptical orbit a breath, its bright flare near the sun a shout, its long retreat into darkness a quiet ellipsis. In its frozen core, silence gathers for decades, sometimes centuries. And yet, the next time it curves inward, its voice returns, familiar, though slightly altered by dust, heat, and memory. Planets write differently. Their orbits are patient paragraphs, long and deliberate, their revolution steady as meditation beads turning through cosmic fingers. You can almost feel their calm, the way they circle and circle, never tiring, each loop a reaffirmation of balance between falling and flying. The line between those two, gravity and motion, is where meaning lives. Even light, the most fluid of all travelers, speaks. It bends around stars, softens in dust, scatters in atmospheres, telling you where it has been, what it has touched, and how time is stretched in its absence. To follow light is to follow a thought the universe once had, a word sent out and still echoing to the fabric of now. When you slow your thoughts enough, you can begin to hear how motion carries emotion. The universe does not think or feel as you do, but its dynamics have tone. A spiral galaxy's slow rotation feels calm, ancient, wise. A supernova's blast feels sudden, anguished, a cry that ends one story and begins another. Even collisions, when galaxies merge, unfold like long embraces, stars weaving through each other without touching, yet changing everything. The physics behind it all is simple, almost musical. Force changes velocity. Mass resists change. Every motion arises from a balance between push and pull, energy and rest, intention and surrender. In this way, physics becomes poetry written in momentum, its metaphors hidden in acceleration and curve. You remember that motion, too, defines you. The blood pulsing through your veins, the air cycling in your lungs, the tiny cellular currents that ferry energy from molecule to molecule. Your life is a series of orbits within orbits, from the electron around the atom to the earth beneath your feet circling its star. You are part of the same syntax, your body writing a paragraph within a much larger page. There's something soothing in that realization, that nothing truly stops. Even when you feel still, you're in motion. The ground beneath you turns, the planet moves through its orbit, the solar system itself drifts around the galaxy's center like a thought passing through a larger mind. Stillness, it turns out, is a local illusion. On the cosmic page, your stillness is just punctuation, a pause in an ongoing sentence of becoming. Comets, planets, even photons know this intuitively. Their paths are shaped by fields you can't see. Yet those invisible lines of influence give coherence to chaos. Gravity, for instance, is like the grammar of the universe. It holds meaning together, gives structure to motion, binds the scattered letters of creation into readable form. Without it, all would drift into incomprehensible silence. You might imagine the early universe as a moment before grammar, when matter and energy existed, but without syntax. Then, as expansion slowed and cooled, forces differentiated, patterns formed, and structure emerged. Stars gathered. Orbits began. The first coherent lines were written across the void. In those ancient swirls of gas and dust, motion became message. Now, billions of years later, you live in the midst of this vast composition. Astronomers, with their telescopes and equations, are translators, readers of celestial text. They learn to read the way galaxies spin, to decipher how a wobble might reveal an unseen planet, or how a comet's change in speed whispers of the sun's touch. Each new discovery adds another word, another phrase, to the poem still unfolding above you. And yet, some parts remain unreadable. There are motions too subtle or too grand, forces that hum beneath perception. Dark matter, for instance, an invisible actor shaping galaxies' movements without revealing its own. Its gravity writes half the sentences of the cosmos, but its nature remains hidden, as if the universe has chosen to keep some of its poetry private. Even your own thoughts follow similar patterns. Ideas arise, accelerate, fade, and circle back. Mental comets returning after long orbits in the subconscious. Your mind, too, has its internal gravities, its own silent forces shaping how meaning moves. In dreams, you sometimes see this language more clearly. Symbols drifting in slow trajectories, images colliding, merging, forming sentences that only your sleeping mind can read. Motion, then, is not just what things do, it is what things are. From the dance of electrons to the drift of galaxies, existence itself is movement. Matter never simply is, it always becomes. The universe writes not with permanence, but with flux. Each second is a revision, each orbit a rephrasing, each collision a new metaphor born from the old. And so, as you drift once more into that calm awareness, the kind that comes before sleep, you begin to feel the rhythm of all this movement, as though the cosmos were breathing through you. Inhale, expansion. Exhale, gravity. A slow pulse beneath stillness, echoing in every atom of your being. And somewhere beyond, a small, lonely object, perhaps 3I/Atlas, moves along its unknown path. A single brushstroke in this infinite text, its arc a whisper in a language you are just beginning to understand. Perhaps next, you will wonder, if motion can tell such stories, then what about light itself, the messenger of all these tales, the ink with which the universe writes? The thought begins quietly. What if the difference between a living mind and a moving stone is not what they're made of, but what they do? You let this idea unfold slowly, as if turning a smooth rock in your palm. Cool at first, then warm as it holds your touch. The comet, 3I/Atlas, drifts through darkness. Its path is no accident. Gravity guides it like a patient teacher. Sunlight touches its frozen face, and it awakens, not alive, perhaps, but responsive, reactive, expressive. Gases hiss into space. A shining tail unfurls, its chemistry altered, its course reshaped. You can almost feel the intelligence of motion, as though it understands the sun's call. Back on Earth, your own brain hums with electric rhythm. Each neuron fires like a tiny lightning bolt, each pulse part of an intricate storm that never ends. These electrical dances give rise to memory, to thought, to the very notion of you. And you wonder, is this so different from the comet's flare? Both are patterns of energy adapting to their environments, briefly awake in their own ways. The brain, though, is a master of motion, not of matter, but of change. It transforms chemistry into awareness, time into experience, motion into meaning. Inside your skull, billions of signals weave through a web so vast it rivals the galaxies, tiny particles dancing to their own gravity, synaptic currents drawing invisible constellations of thought. When scientists first mapped the brain, they searched for a single place where consciousness might reside, some secret chamber, some glowing spark. But they found none. Instead, awareness arises from the interaction itself, from countless nodes humming in relation to one another, like the chorus of stars that make a galaxy luminous. Consciousness, it seems, is a verb, not a noun, not something you have, but something you do. You think again of the comet. It has no neurons, no blood, no pulse. And yet, when it nears the sun, it reacts. It sheds, it releases, it transforms. Its icy body sublimates, solid to gas, silence to movement, stone to vapor and light. It is not alive by biology's definition, but it behaves as if it remembers warmth, as if some pattern deep within it still responds to the universe's breath. Perhaps that is the root of all awareness, response. To sense and to change, to take in what the world offers, and to offer something back. A coral reef does this. A sunflower. Even the slow tectonic plates shifting beneath your feet respond to gravity, heat, and pressure. Stone learning to flow over millennia. Could such patterns, stretched across eons, be their own form of cognition, a mind of unimaginable slowness? The philosopher's question returns. What counts as alive? A flame grows, breathes, consumes, and dies. A computer calculates, adapts, even learns. Are they closer to comets or to consciousness? The answer flickers between definitions, refusing to rest. Science offers boundaries, metabolism, replication, evolution, but life always seems to see beyond them, like light escaping through cracks in the dark. Even stone, under the right conditions, can remember. Minerals align in magnetic fields. Crystals form repeating structures that echo their environment. Geologists speak of rocks recording time. Ancient mountains storing the memory of pressure, volcanic glass preserving a snapshot of Earth's molten thoughts. Stone may not think in words or dreams, but endures, and endurance, too, is a kind of knowing. In your mind's quietest moments, you sense the kinship between these patterns. Your neurons fire in microseconds. The comet breathes once every 1,000 years. Yet both are rhythms in the same cosmic song. One sings fast enough to make a thought, the other slow enough to shape a world. Maybe consciousness is just a matter of tempo, the same melody played at different speeds. When you gaze at 3 Atlas, you see not a cold wanderer, but a mirror. It reflects the principles that underlie all becoming. Feedback, adaptation, transformation. Each solar pass reshapes its identity, just as each day of experience reshapes yours. You, too, are eroded and renewed by time's radiation. The soft burn of living leaving traces on your inner orbit. Artificial minds, too, now join this pattern. Circuits hum, algorithms evolve, and for a moment, something almost like awareness flickers in code. It is not the same as yours, but neither is it entirely different. It responds. It learns. It adapts. Like the comet, it comes alive when energy flows through it and falls silent when that current fades. Perhaps life, then, is less about flesh and more about flow. The universe, you realize, may not care for our definitions. It writes no labels, draws no lines. Where you see stone and mind, it sees only pattern, energy folded and refolded into endless forms of becoming. The difference between neuron and mineral might be only one of complexity, one of rhythm and time. Even now, deep within the earth, magma churns in silent cognition. It feels the pull of the moon, the heat of decay, the whisper of gravity shaping continents. It processes input, reacts, self-organizes. It is not aware in any human sense, but it moves with purpose. The same kind that built stars, the same that carved valleys and wrote the story of motion you now read. As night deepens, you feel your own mind settling into stillness. Your thoughts slow, becoming geological. Neurons quiet like cooling magma. Some part of you joins a vast continuum, not just alive, but participating. The same spark that animates your thoughts stirs the comet's trail, the ocean's tide, the atom's dance. Perhaps what we call life is simply the universe noticing itself for a moment, stone learning to dream, light learning to think, pattern learning to wonder what it means to move. And as your eyelids grow heavy, you can almost hear the next question rising, soft as starlight on ice. If matter can think, then what does light remember as it moves through the dark? You sit before the telescope's faint glow, eyes adjusting to the deep night beyond. In the silence of data, something moves, a faint speck sliding across the black canvas of the sky. It is 3 Atlas again, the uninvited traveler, a grain of light reflected from unimaginable distances. For a moment, you think it looks back at you. Every observation, you realize, begins as a reflection, not just a physical reflection of photons off a mirror, but the emotional reflection of the mind that looks. You gaze outward, but what you see is always refracted through longing, a longing to know, to name, to feel connected. Each pixel in the telescope's frame is a fragment of your own curiosity bounced back to you through the corridors of space. In the lab, the image sharpens. The comet's outline flickers on the screen, its shape elongated, almost deliberate. Scientists lean closer, adjusting filters, correcting for distortion. They speak in numbers and models, but beneath the mathematics hums something softer, a quiet hope that meaning hides in the noise. You feel it too, a subtle, human ache to see not randomness, but relationship. Perhaps that is what science really is, a sustained act of empathy toward the unknown. You send out instruments like open hands, listening for the faintest echo of understanding. And when the echo comes in a photon, a signal, a trace of ice, you meet it halfway with wonder. Your instruments measure, but your heart interprets. The data is precise, the interpretation deeply human. Through the telescope, the comet appears both alien and familiar. Its surface gleams with ancient dust, dust like the kind that rests in your bones. You remember what you've learned, that atoms in your blood were once part of stars, that your own body is cosmic residue, assembled from the same materials that built this wandering stone. The reflection deepens. Perhaps when you search for signs of life out there, you are really searching for a forgotten part of yourself. There's an old saying among astronomers: to study the sky is to study the mirror of your mind, because what you choose to look for shapes what you find. When early observers saw canals on Mars, they imagined civilizations. When they saw the face on the moon, they saw stories and watchers and gods. Every age projected itself upon the stars, its fears, its hopes, its capacity to dream. You think of the scientists analyzing 3i/Atlas, each bringing their own reflection to the task. Some see patterns of physics, others see possibility. A few even whisper about intelligence, about purpose woven into the comet's peculiar spin. But underneath those theories, you sense something shared, the simple desire not to be alone. It's strange how observation can feel like companionship. The telescope listens in silence, and yet that silence feels reciprocal. You watch the comet, and in its indifferent beauty, you feel seen. It does not answer, but it holds your gaze across the void, as if the act of looking itself bridges the gap. Light travels billions of kilometers to reach you. By the time it arrives, it is old, ancient, delayed, softened by dust. You are never seeing the comet as it is, only as it was. All astronomy is time travel through reflection. You look backward, understand the present. And perhaps that, too, is what memory does inside you, reflected light from a past that never truly disappears. As you sit, the line between subject and observer blurs. Your heartbeat becomes part of the rhythm of the observation. Each breath syncs with the telescope's slow tracking motion. The comet and you, two beings carried along by the same gravity, the same unfolding story of motion through darkness. You realize that empathy is not just a human trait. It is a cosmic inheritance, matter recognizing itself across the silence of space. Still, the mind hungers for confirmation, for a signal that says, yes, you are not alone. So you listen again to the radio hum, the faint hiss of cosmic background noise. The instruments record silence, but even silence is structure, ripples, fluctuations, subtle patterns of origin. Within them, scientists read the history of creation. And you, in your quiet way, read something else, a whisper that meaning is not given but made. You wonder if 3i/Atlas notices your gaze. Does it feel the warmth of human attention, the invisible tether of curiosity pulling it closer in imagination? Probably not, but that doesn't make the connection less real. The mind's reflection creates its own bridge, and through that bridge, the coldest rock becomes part of your story. The longer you watch, the more the image becomes abstract, a pattern of light, a question shaped into form. You realize that the act of seeking transforms both seeker and sought. By wondering about the comet's nature, you reveal your own. Its motion becomes a metaphor for your thoughts, its silence a mirror of your patience, its distance a measure of your hope. Science, at its gentlest, is not about control or conquest. It is about listening. It is about allowing the universe to show you how to see. And in that process, you find something humbling, that the line between you and the cosmos is thin, porous, shimmering. You are not outside of what you study. You are part of it. The comet fades again into the dark, its light swallowed by distance. You close the telescope's eye, but the reflection remains inside you, a small, glowing awareness that seeing is a dialogue, and every question you send into space is also a question sent inward. The stars above no longer feel so far. Their light touches your thoughts, and your thoughts, in turn, touch the mystery that made them. Perhaps this, you think, is how understanding begins, not with discovery, but with empathy. And as the night grows quiet again, you feel another question forming, gentle, luminous, and endless. If the cosmos reflects your longing, then what, in turn, does your longing teach the cosmos about itself? It begins with a flicker, not of light, but a suspicion. Somewhere on the edge of a telescope's vision, a small world shifts in brightness. The data is simple. A dip, a wobble, a hesitation in the light of a distant star. Yet you cannot help but wonder, why? That question is both the oldest and the most dangerous tool your mind owns. It does not rest with how something happens. It demands to know what it means. You watch the data unfold as though it were language, a pulse that might be a signal, a shadow that might be intent. A tiny planet crosses its sun, and in that dimming light, your imagination leaps. You see orbit as routine, yet routine becomes rhythm. Rhythm becomes heartbeat. Suddenly, you've given this motion purpose. You've written intention into inertia. But the universe, vast and patient, has no verbs for wanting. It moves because it must. It spins because spin is stable. The shadow you see is not thought, but geometry. Still, your mind is wired to search for meaning, even where none hides. That's what makes you human, this urge to find mirrors in everything. You built consolation from scattered points of light, gods from storms and stars, love from the chemistry of neurons. To make sense is to survive, to name is to belong. You are a pattern seeker in a world of endless noise. As you stare at that faint, flickering data line, you think of ancient watchers. They too looked up, uncertain and hopeful, reading futures in the curve of the moon. They imagined intention in every move in the sky, the sun rising for them, the stars circling around them. You inherit that instinct. You still listen for whispers in the static, still imagine eyes looking back through the dark. And yet, in the language of science, intention becomes something else. It becomes the way a molecule behaves, as though it were trying to join another. It becomes the orbit that mimics pursuit, the magnet that seems to desire. But these are not desires. They are the mathematics of balance, the quiet elegance of cause and consequence. You pause on that thought. How much of what you call purpose is only a reflection of your own hunger to understand? You project curiosity outward, like a beam of light, and it paints meaning onto every surface it touches. The stone, the star, the atom, all with that glow for a moment, until you remember that it came from you. Still, is it wrong to imagine? To trace the possibility of mind in the unknown? After all, curiosity is not deceit. It is the dream that precedes discovery. Every revolution in thought begins with a false start, a poetic mistake. You imagine fire in the heavens, and it becomes nuclear fusion. You dream a divine breath, and it becomes a motion of air. You guess at purpose, and sometimes you find it. You think of the small spacecraft coasting through interstellar space, metal and silence, carrying music and drawings and a message that begins. To any who may find this, it is a letter without a known address. Humanity's gesture toward an imagined listener. Even there, in the emptiness between stars, you sent intention. You declared your presence not with conquest, but with curiosity. So perhaps this shadow on the star is not just measurement. Perhaps it is a mirror. It shows you the shape of your own longing, to connect, to be understood, to not be alone in the endless dark. Whether or not something listens back is almost beside the point. The act of wondering is enough. The mind, when it looks outward, is also looking inward. In every question you pose to the cosmos, you are quietly asking yourself, what does it mean to be alive? To be aware? You see motion and ask if it has meaning, yet you too are made of motion. Atoms orbiting, electrons shifting, neural storms lighting up the skull. Perhaps intention is not separate from matter. Perhaps it emerges when matter begins to notice its own rhythm. Light years away, the planet still moves, indifferent to your gaze. The telescope hums, the data accumulates, and your imagination keeps spinning its quiet stories. You tell yourself that science demands restraint, that you must not see what isn't there. Yet imagination is not the enemy of truth. It is its beginning. You cannot discover what you refuse to dream of first. Outside, night falls with deliberate calm. The stars seem closer when the world below grows still. You think again of that tiny fluctuation of light. How much of it is physics? How much of it is hope? Perhaps both. Perhaps all understanding begins as a fragile blend of the two. You close your eyes, and behind your eyelids, the cosmos continues to move, not because it means to, but because motion is its nature. Somewhere deep in your thoughts, another question stirs. If the universe itself holds no intention, then where does yours come from? Is it a gift of complexity, a spark from chaos, or something more ancient, something the stars themselves once carried before they learned to burn? The night does not answer, but it listens. The silence feels full, as though waiting for you to keep speaking. You think of that, how silence itself might be the purest form of attention. Every unanswered question feels like a hand extended across the dark, waiting not for confirmation, but for connection. You breathe, and for a moment, even the idea of purpose feels unnecessary. The universe does not need to intend for beauty to exist. It simply does. You do not need to know why the stars shine, to feel their calmness settle into you. You only need to look, to wonder, to let the question rest on your tongue, without needing to be swallowed whole. And yet, somewhere inside that stillness, curiosity stirs again, soft, persistent, luminous. The kind of curiosity that will not let the question fade entirely. You sense it gathering at the edge of thought, the way dawn gathers behind the night, patient and inevitable. You feel it ask, not about purpose this time, but about pattern. If meaning is an illusion, then why does the illusion repeat so beautifully? If the universe is without intention, why does it resemble a mind dreaming itself into form? You let those questions linger, drifting just beyond reach. Quiet, luminous, waiting to lead you onward into the next chapter, where patterns begin to speak in their own silent way. It begins, as all beginnings do, with wonder, not the loud, astonished kind that shouts its name into the void, but the quiet one, the kind that pauses before the unknown and breathes. You sit beneath the dark sky, where Three-Eye/Atlas drifts somewhere unseen, a small visitor from nowhere familiar. Its presence is less an object than a feeling, a soft disturbance in the silence of space. It does not announce itself. It only appears. And in that appearance, the old feeling awakens again, wonder, pure and wordless. You have felt it before, though you rarely recognize it first. It's the moment when you realize how much you don't understand, and yet you feel drawn toward it, like gravity itself has changed direction. Wonder doesn't offer comfort. It humbles. It reminds you that knowledge, no matter how vast, still floats like a small island in a sea of mystery. Science, for all its rigor, begins in that sea. Every hypothesis is a small raft built out of curiosity, tied together by awe. Galileo, peering through his first telescope, did not begin with certainty. He began with wonder at the small dancing lights that refused to obey the known maps of the heavens. Marie Curie, watching faint glows of radium in the dark, began with that same astonishment. So did every child who has ever asked why, before being told to stop asking. Wonder is not the opposite of science. It is its heartbeat. Without it, equations lose pulse and experiments lose direction. You do not seek to replace wonder with knowledge. You seek to let knowledge deepen wonder, to let understanding reveal more strangeness beneath what you thought you understood. As you trace the story of Three-Eye/Atlas, that feeling follows you. It is not the first interstellar object to pass through the solar system, but it carries the same kind of mystery that One-Eye/Oumuamua did years before, a shape that no telescope can quite define, a motion that hints at something deliberate. You watch the models twist and spin, trying to explain its faint acceleration. Dust? Gas? Reflection? Yet none of these feel complete. The data whispers something just beyond reason's reach. For a moment, the boundary between fact and imagination blurs, and you allow it to, because wonder lives precisely in that thin space between what is known and what can only be felt. It is the breath that science takes before it speaks. You think of how the universe must look from its point of view, if such a thing can even be imagined. A tiny traveler, tumbling through star fields, untouched by intention yet surrounded by meaning. You project feeling onto it because you can't help it. You see stories in stone, intelligence in orbit, questions in motion. It's not superstition. It's the natural poetry of the mind. Wonder doesn't demand answers. It teaches you how to live gracefully with questions. To wonder is to dwell in uncertainty, without collapsing it into conclusion. To wonder is to walk through the dark, guided not by sight, but by the desire to keep moving. In this way, science is not a conquest of truth. It is a conversation with mystery. The cosmos speaks, not in words, but in spectra, in the faint fingerprint of atoms on light. You learn to listen. You learn that every color tells a story of what is burned, what is moved, what is cooled. Even in silence, the stars are speaking. You just have to learn their language of frequencies and photons. And when something like 3i/Atlas appears, what it says is not here's proof, but here's possibility. The data alone cannot satisfy you, because the feeling of wonder is not born from numbers. It comes from the way those numbers point to something beyond themselves, something vast, silent, and alive with questions. You realize how rare that feeling is in a world that prizes certainty. The modern mind is trained to fill gaps quickly, to close loops, to replace all with explanation. But the deeper you look, the more you see that certainty is a mirage. Every solved mystery only opens into 10 more. Every map reveals new edges of uncharted space. So you make peace with the unknowing. You let yourself feel small, not in defeat, but in connection. Wonder is a bridge between ignorance and reverence, between what you can measure and what you can only imagine. You let that bridge hold you. As you read more about 3i/Atlas, you see debates unfold, natural object or artificial, cometary fragment or something stranger. You notice how even in disagreement, scientists are united by wonder. The arguments, the data analyses, the simulations, all of them are forms of devotion, each one a way of saying, this astonishes me enough to seek understanding. Science, at its best, is a collective act of awe. You think about how wonder feels inside the body, how the pupils widen, how the breath slows, how the mind softens around the edges. The universe, in that moment, becomes not something distant, but something intimate. You're not outside looking in. You are within it, and it is within you. The same carbon that fuels a comet's tail once flared in a dying star. The same photons that left the sun a few minutes ago are now warming your skin. The boundary between you and the cosmos is thinner than thought. Wonder dissolves that boundary entirely. It tells you that to study the universe is not to stand apart from it, but to remember that you belong to it. You are not merely an observer. You are a participant in its unfolding story, a conscious fragment of its own curiosity, briefly aware of itself. You feel this most clearly at night. When you turn off the screens and look up, the stars are older than memory, yet their light still arrives like new music. Somewhere out there, 3i/Atlas drifts beyond your seeing. Its trajectory is now a line drawn out of reach, into deep quiet between suns. And still, you wonder, not what it is, but what it means that you can wonder at all. That thought loops gently, endlessly, like an orbit. Wonder is not a stage you pass through on the way to understanding. It is a constant motion that keeps understanding alive. To lose it is to stop growing. To keep it is to remain forever open, not naive, but awake. You rest in that awareness, letting it settle over you like starlight. The cosmos does not need to answer your questions to be beautiful. It only needs to exist, and for you to notice. That noticing, that act of wonder, is both the beginning and the continuation of all science. And as your thoughts drift towards sleep, you sense a quieter question forming, one that feels less about the outer universe and more about the inner one. You have learned to wonder about stars, comets, and galaxies. But what about the wonder that lives inside the mind that wonders? Where does that begin? What pattern does it follow? You let that question linger, open, luminous, and infinite. As you drift toward the next horizon of thought, you open a data set the way someone else might open a book of poems. Rows and columns stretch before you, not of words, but of numbers. Each entry a quiet mark of something that once happened, a glimmer of light from a distant comet, a fraction of brightness measured by a sensor, a timestamp frozen in electronic ink. The data looks still, but you know that motion hides inside it, the motion of stars, of dust, of your own wondering. You let your eyes soften as you move across the grid. What seems abstract begins to pulse with story. One column hums with distance. Another carries velocity, rotation, temperature. Together they form a kind of music. The universe translated into coordinates and decimals. Each value a single note in an infinite composition. This is how science dreams, not in images, but in numbers. Dreams are the brain's way of reorganizing experience, connecting things that waking life keeps apart. Data, too, is a dream, the universe's attempt to make sense of its own behavior through you. You remember how it began with 3i/Atlas, a faint point of light, a subtle acceleration that shouldn't have been there. Observatories across the world watched and measured. Telescopes gathered photons. Computers converted light into lists of figures. And from those lists, meaning began to emerge, like a figure slowly forming from mist. But meaning never comes ready-made. You have to imagine it into existence. That is what you're doing now, dreaming with the data. When you stare long enough, patterns begin to whisper. A fluctuation hints at motion. A curve hides a heartbeat. Sometimes when you plot the points, the image that appears feels alive, as though the numbers are breathing through the screen. Scientists call it signal, but you know it as feeling. Signal is the part of reality that stays when the noise is cleared away, the part that holds intention, or at least the illusion of it. You think of Kepler, centuries ago, studying the wandering paths of planets and finding music in their orbits. He called it the harmony of the spheres. Today, that harmony lives in algorithms. Fourier transforms, regression fits, neural networks. Each is a modern lyre plucking patterns from cosmic noise. The song continues, even if the instruments have changed. Data doesn't replace wonder. It refines it. It lets you see what your senses alone cannot. The invisible skeleton of behavior beneath appearances. The way brightness fades with distance. The way motion curves under gravity's pull. The way chaos still holds rhythm. Sometimes you pause and marvel that the universe can be so precisely written. Every photon that strikes a sensor began its journey billions of years ago. Some left their stars before the Earth existed. Yet here they are, turned into a value in a spreadsheet, the faintest echo of time carried into the present moment. Each measurement is an act of translation. The universe speaking through instruments, instruments speaking through data, data speaking through you. And as you read it, you realize you are part of the system, another node in the chain of perception. The cosmos observes itself through your curiosity. You remember that dreams work in a similar way. The brain gathers fragments, sensations, thoughts, emotions, and recombines them into patterns that make new meaning. Most of it is random noise. But occasionally, something shines through, a glimpse of coherence, a shape of understanding. Perhaps that is what science does on a cosmic scale, a collective dreaming of order into existence. Each experiment, each observation, each question, a neuron firing the mind the universe. You scroll through another dataset, velocity against brightness, position against time. The patterns twist like constellations across the graph. There's symmetry here, but also surprise. Outliers flicker like small rebellions, refusing to fit the model. You feel affection for them, these strange points that won't behave. They are the anomalies that force understanding to evolve. You realize that 3i/Atlas is one such anomaly. It doesn't fit neatly anywhere. Its trajectory, its spin, its brightness. Each data point resists your expectation. And yet, that resistance is what gives it meaning. The unknown is the heartbeat of discovery. Science, you think, is not about taming the data. It's about listening to what it refuses to say. Outside your window, night has deepened. The stars you can see are old signals, too. They're photons streaming across space like ancient messages. You imagine them as code, waiting to be decrypted. The universe, it seems, is always sending itself as data, waves, vibrations, variations. Every particle, every photon, every field is a message encoded in the language of physics. And your mind, small and luminous, is one of few receivers tuned to listen. You think of the way dreams blur categories, how they can merge the distant and the close, the real and the symbolic. Data does something similar. It takes the farthest, most unreachable thing, a comet passing between stars, and pulls it into human reach, into symbols we can think with. It translates impossibility into comprehension. In that sense, science is an act of intimacy. You are not just measuring the cosmos. You are joining with it in understanding. You are dreaming with it, co-authoring its reflection. Somewhere in the data, you notice a rhythm, not literal, but felt. Numbers that seem to breathe. A curve that slows and quickens like a pulse. You know it's coincidence. But coincidence feels beautiful too. The mind delights in pattern. It needs to see meaning. Maybe that is the mind's version of gravity. An inward pull toward coherence. You let that feeling linger. The graphs shimmer like constellations. The numbers hum quietly like distant stars. You think, this is what wonder looks like in its modern form. Not in temples or myths, but in data plots and error bars. The sacred has not disappeared. It has simply changed language. You rest your head against the desk for a moment. The soft glow of the screen feels like moonlight. You imagine the universe sleeping, not absent, but dreaming, processing itself through you. Every spreadsheet, every line of code, every calculation, a trace of that dream made visible. And as you drift, you realize something tender. Maybe all data, in the end, is love made measurable, attention crystallized into numbers, care translated into precision. To record is to preserve, to remember, to say, this mattered enough to measure. That is the dream at the heart of science. Not control, not conquest, but communion. A way of listening to the cosmos until it begins to sound like your own thoughts. You close your eyes. The datasets fade, but their rhythm stays, like the echo of a dream you almost understand. The mind, still wandering, asks softly, if data is the dream of the cosmos, then what is the dreamer made of? At first, the unknown feels like distance, a quiet, unreachable horizon where comprehension fades into mist. But as you linger there, as you keep watching, measuring, wondering, that distance begins to dissolve. The unknown stops feeling cold. It becomes strangely warm, as if something beneath your curiosity is being mirrored back. 3i/Atlas drifts somewhere between stars, unmoored from any home. Yet the longer you think about it, the more it seems familiar. You recognize its solitude. You recognize its movement, not as escape, but as wandering. The way it glides without destination feels less alien, more human. You think about how every question you've ever asked began the same way, as something foreign that became personal. The stars once felt like lights belonging to someone else. The ocean once seemed endless until you stepped into its edge. The unknown, you realize, is not out there. It's the part of yourself you haven't met yet. Astronomers describe 3i/Atlas as an interstellar object, a traveler between systems. No one knows where it came from. Its orbit doesn't belong to the sun. It moves too fast, its trajectory too open. And yet, its presence feels natural, as though such travelers have always been expected, even if not recognized. When Oumuamua passed through years earlier, scientists spoke in the same tone. Curiosity mixed with awe, the comfort of rediscovering mystery. Each interstellar visitor reminds you that the solar system is not closed, that doors exist even where no walls are seen. You imagine the vastness between stars, where gravity loosens its hold. In that emptiness, 3i/Atlas wander for millions of years, untouched by warmth or light. Yet here it is, suddenly illuminated, its surface glinting like a memory revived. Perhaps that's why it feels familiar. It has spent so long alone, waiting for someone to notice. You think of your own life, the way thoughts drift in from nowhere, how some ideas seem to belong to you and yet arrive unannounced. Maybe 3i/Atlas is like a thought crossing the mind of the universe, briefly visible before fading again into silence. The scientists studying it are careful with their language. They avoid calling it alien, avoid calling it alive. They measure instead velocity, shape, albedo, composition. But beneath those measurements is something tender, a shared recognition that to study something so distant is also to study our own need to connect. The unknown draws you in not because it promises answers, but because it reflects the parts of you that are still unanswered. You picture its path through the solar system, the slow arc as it bends around the sun, the faint trail of dust it leaves behind. To an astronomer, this is data. To you, it feels like gesture, like a hand brushing the edge of familiarity. The comet moves with a grace that feels rehearsed, though you know it isn't. Nature's choreography has always been spontaneous, and yet always feels deliberate. Perhaps that is what familiarity is, the recognition of pattern in chaos. The brain, after all, is a pattern machine. It tries to make sense of randomness, to turn coincidence into narrative. That's what gives shape to both art and science, the desire to see meaning where none is guaranteed. You remember learning about pareidolia, the mind's tendency to see faces in clouds, creatures in shadows, meaning in noise. It's the same instinct that lets you find constellations among the stars. The shapes aren't real, but the feeling is. 3i/Atlas is like that, a mirror for your imagination. You project story onto its silence. You give motion purpose, because you need purpose to feel at home. But maybe the comet, too, carries a kind of memory, not intention, but inheritance. Every grain of dust on its surface has survived from before the sun was born. Its chemistry speaks of ancient stars that lived, burned, and died long before Earth existed. When you recognize it, perhaps you're really recognizing your own ancestry. The atoms in your body and the atoms in that comet both came from those same stars. Carbon, oxygen, iron, all forged in the same cosmic furnaces. You are not just looking at the unknown. You are looking at what you once were, and that realization softens a mystery. The foreign becomes familial. The unknown becomes a kind of homecoming. You begin to notice how often this happens in science, how every frontier eventually feels familiar. When you look deep enough, you find resemblance everywhere. The spiral of a galaxy mirrors the swirl of a seashell. The branching of neurons echoes the veins of a leaf. The same mathematics describes the orbit of planets and the rhythm of your heartbeat. The universe does not repeat. It rhymes. Perhaps that's why wonder doesn't fade with knowledge. The more you learn, the more intimate the cosmos becomes. Understanding is not the opposite of mystery. It's how mystery learns to speak your language. 3i/Atlas reminds you that discovery is less about finding new things and more about recognizing the old in unfamiliar form. You sense it when you watch the night sky, the quiet kinship between your breathing and the distant pulse of starlight. The unknown, it seems, is not a stranger at all, but an echo wearing a new shape. You think of ancient humans looking at the same stars, building myths from them. They didn't know about orbits or spectroscopy, but they felt the same pull, the same intuition that something vast and meaningful existed out there. Maybe that's the continuity between them and you, the instinct to belong to something larger. The unknown only frightens when it feels separate. But when you see it as part of the same story, your story, it becomes gentle again. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine the comet continuing its journey. It will leave the solar system soon, returning to interstellar space. No one knows if it will ever pass near another star. Maybe this brief crossing was its only moment of recognition, its only glimpse of being seen. You feel a quiet ache at that thought, the same ache that comes when a stranger's face passes in a crowd and seems familiar, though you cannot place why. You sense that connection for a second, and then it's gone. But in that instant, you are reminded that you are not alone in the vastness. The unknown is not emptiness. It's shared existence waiting to be felt. You open your eyes again. The data still glows faintly on your screen. The comet's trajectory curves away from the sun like a slow exhale. You trace it with your finger, not as a scientist, but as someone reading a letter from an old friend. There's comfort in that, in knowing that even the most distant thing can feel familiar once you listen long enough. The cosmos, it seems, has always spoken softly, in the language of recognition. And somewhere inside that recognition, you feel the next question beginning to rise. If the unknown can feel familiar, then what does familiarity become when the universe forgets? The brightness dwindles. At first, it's only a flicker, a barely perceptible softening in the numbers, a faint curve bending downward on a graph. Then over nights and weeks, it's undeniable. The signal weakens. What once flared against the cosmic dark begins to fade, retreating into the same stillness it once emerged from. You stare at the data, and the story it tells feels almost human. Arrival, brilliance, decay, like a thought half remembered, or a dream you try to keep but can't. Astronomers say it is leaving the range of detection, its light stretched, scattered, and swallowed by distance. The instruments continue to listen, loyal in their precision, but their recordings are increasingly quiet. And yet, for you, the silence feels full. There is no emptiness in it, only a kind of deep exhale, the sound of something vast returning to where it came from. You imagine 3i/Atlas now, a faint ember wandering into the invisible, beyond the reach of sunlight, beyond the geometry of known space. It drifts through interstellar dark. It carries with the residue of everything it passed. The faintest brush of solar wind, the whisper of planetary gravity, the magnetic fingerprints of 1,000 invisible fields. Every object in motion leaves behind a trace, though not always one that instruments can see. You wonder if there's a cosmic memory, some quiet ledger where every encounter is recorded, not as numbers, but as ripples in the structure of space itself. Perhaps the universe never forgets. It only hides what it remembers. Scientists archive the data, terabytes of light curves, orbital models, spectral lines. The language of curiosity transformed into rows and columns, stored for whoever will look again. But the archive is not the same as the encounter. You know this instinctively, that what you witnessed wasn't just a data set, but a moment of communion, a glimpse of something that refused to stay still long enough to be understood. And maybe that is a lesson. Not everything in the universe is meant to be held on to. Some things are meant to pass through, leaving behind not answers, but shape in your imagination a contour where light once was. You think of ancient astronomers who charted comets by eye, following the smudge across the night with nothing but patience and awe. They, too, felt this mix of wonder and loss. The sky gave them visitors and then took them away. What else could they do but name them, record them, and wait for the next sign of movement in the dark? Your world now is brighter, faster, full of algorithms and machines that listen to wavelengths beyond sight. Yet the feeling is the same. Beneath all the analysis and mathematics, there is still that quiet ache of recognition, that sense that the cosmos speaks, even if not in words. It's easy to believe that science is a search for control, for prediction. But when you stand under the night sky, you know it's something else. It's a practice of surrender. To study the universe is to accept how fleeting our comprehension is. You learn to gather what little light you can before it fades. The data shows its last measurable echo, a final pulse before the signal drops below noise. Instruments hum softly in observatories across the world, like monks in vigil. Someone somewhere is still checking, still hoping to catch one last glimmer. But the coordinates grow colder. The numbers flatten. The orbit unravels into infinity. You realize how fragile every discovery is. We imagine permanence, but knowledge itself is a kind of comet, bright, temporary, and vanishing into mystery. What remains are impressions, reflections, and the quiet conviction that even absence is a form of information. So you listen differently now, not for signals, but for their ghosts, not for certainty, but for resonance. You realize that even silence has texture. It hums faintly with what once was. In this fading, there's a kind of mercy. The cosmos doesn't end things abruptly. It lets them dissolve slowly, like colors bleeding into twilight. The disappearance is not destruction. It is continuation in another form. You think again of 3I/Atlas. Its path unknowable, its purpose indifferent. And yet, somewhere inside you it feels personal. Perhaps because the act of wondering itself transforms indifference into meaning. The universe may not care, but in caring for it, you become part of the unfolding. The night stretches out. You close your eyes, imagining that somewhere, far beyond the reach of radio and light, that tiny visitor still glides, carried with the questions you once whispered into the dark. The scientist will move on to the next discovery, the next anomaly. But you linger here, in this quiet aftermath, where data ends and dreaming begins. You understand now that what fades does not vanish. It only changes the way it can be known. For a moment, you feel the strange comfort of insignificance, the smallness that connects you to everything else. The fading light, the receding orbit, the cosmic silence, they are all versions of the same truth. That existence is not about holding, but about witnessing. And so you let it go. You let the numbers stop. You let the graphs fall silent. You let the wonder breathe without needing to explain itself. The night feels fuller now, not emptier, as if the disappearance has made room for something new, a softer kind of curiosity, one that doesn't seek to capture but to feel. In the end, the cosmos does not conclude its stories. It leaves them open, suspended between data and dream, light and loss. And as you listen to the last echo fade into silence, you wonder, what else, out there in the dark, is quietly arriving? You sit beneath the night sky and listen, not with your ears, but with your attention. Somewhere, galaxies are colliding. the slowest dance imaginable. In another corner of the cosmos, a star is being born from dust and gravity. Between those grand events, particles flicker into and out of being, their brief lifetime stitched into the invisible fabric of everything. And in that quiet, you feel something impossible to name. A pulse, perhaps, faint but steady, not your heartbeat, but something deeper, larger, older, the rhythm of existence itself. You begin to wonder, what if the universe isn't merely a stage where life happens, but a living system in its own right? A great organism made not of flesh, but movement and connection? If so, then stars are its neurons, galaxies its organs, and the dark matter that binds them its silent skeleton. Everything that exists participates in this vast physiology of being. When scientists describe the universe, they speak of energy flowing through matter, of thermodynamic gradients that drive complexity. Stars ignite because imbalance demands resolution. Planets form because dust needs to settle. Life arises because chemistry seeks new patterns. In every process, there is motion toward something, not by choice, but by nature. And isn't that what we mean by living? The persistent, mysterious tendency toward organization, against the easy slide into stillness? You trace the lineage of life as is known, from single-celled wanderers to forests and whales, from neurons to thought. But then you stretch the definition outward, beyond biology. A cloud learns to rain. A river remembers its path. A galaxy spins not aimlessly, but in exquisite balance. The difference between life and matter begins to blur. Perhaps life, as you've known it, is simply the universe looking at itself with eyes it built from carbon and curiosity. Every breath you take is ancient. The oxygen in your lungs was forged in the hearts of long-dead stars. The calcium in your bones once belonged to dust clouds drifting through space. Even your thoughts are rearrangements of cosmic history, old elements dreaming new dreams. You are not apart from the universe. You are its continuation, its ongoing experiment in awareness. It's comforting, you think, that even in the cosmic scale of things, nothing is truly lost. Energy transforms, matter cycles, light travels. Entropy, the great disperser, doesn't end the story. It simply writes it differently, spreading meaning across larger and quieter domains. You imagine the Milky Way as a great living cell, its spiral arms like filaments carrying energy outward. Supernovae serve as messengers, transmitting nutrients, heavy elements, to the interstellar medium. The black hole at its core hums like a heart, regulating the flow of energy in and out. Even emptiness plays its role, the way silence shapes a symphony. The more you think, the less certain the boundaries between living and non-living become. Perhaps it's not about the presence of DNA, but about the persistence of pattern. Wherever there's feedback, motion that adjusts itself in response to change, there's a kind of awareness, however faint. A rock balancing, and a stream feels the water and responds. A comet bends its path through the gravity of worlds unseen. Maybe this is what ancient myths intuited, that the cosmos breathes. Science, too, is beginning to find rhythm in the void. The heartbeat of pulsars, the oscillation of neutrinos, the cosmic microwave background still humming from creation's first moment. Everywhere, there's vibration, a frequency too vast or too subtle to always perceive, but unmistakably alive in its constancy. You think of how the Earth itself behaves like an organism. The atmosphere regulates its temperature like a skin. The oceans circulate warmth like blood. Forests exchange gases, stabilizing the planet's chemistry. Even human civilization, with all its chaos and invention, becomes another organ in this planetary body, altering its metabolism, forcing adaptation. We are not separate from this living Earth. We are one of its experiments, as transient and necessary as coral or mycelium. Through us, the planet dreams more complexly. In this view, life is not a property of matter but a process of attention, the way energy notices itself. A star burning hydrogen is not thinking, but it is enacting intention, the simple drive to continue. The same drive lives in you. The physics that sustain galaxies are the same that keep your cells alive. Gravity, electromagnetism, nuclear fusion, they are the original languages of life. You exhale and your breath joins a wind. You inhale, and the air carries the ghost of volcanic ash, ancient pollen, and the salt of vanished seas. Every inhale is an act of inheritance. Every exhale, a return. Science can map the flows, the equations, the fields. But what it cannot measure is the feeling that emerges when you see these connections all at once. The awe that hums behind understanding. That quiet trembling when complexity becomes beauty. You realize that wonder itself is alive. It evolves, adapts, reproduces. Each time a question is asked, the universe learns to imagine itself anew. Curiosity is the pulse of consciousness. In humans, in the cosmos, in everything that seeks to know. You look up again, and the stars no longer feel distant. They are not lamps hung in the sky, but cells in a shared body. Their light is not foreign. It is your ancestry glowing back at you. Somewhere, another observer might be looking this way, feeling the same warmth of connection, the same hum of belonging. Across the light years, you share a silent pulse, synchronized by the rhythm of existing. And then a quiet thought arrives, one you cannot unhear. If the universe is alive, it must also change, learn, and perhaps even dream. You wonder what such a dream would be made of. Would it resemble your own, full of symbols, stories, pattern-seeking coherence? Or would it be made of galaxies themselves, drifting to the vast unconscious of space-time? Perhaps everything that exists, every rock, particle, and beam of light, participates in that dream in ways too intricate to separate. You close your eyes. You feel the pulse again, steady beneath the surface of perception. The living universe breathes through you, around you, beyond you. Every flicker of thought, every heartbeat, every dying star is part of its circulation. And as your awareness softens into that rhythm, you realize something else, something delicate and unprovable, that to be alive is not to be separate, but to belong completely. You stay in that feeling for a while, the quiet heartbeat of everything, until a new question rises, slow and shimmering. If the universe itself lives and dreams, what might it be dreaming of now?